Welcome, everybody, to the Thursday, September 6th, 2021 formal meeting of the Iowa City Planning and Zoning Commission. We will start off with roll call. Susan?
Here. That's Susan Craig.
Billy Townsend.
Mike
Sorry.
Hench.
Mark Signs.
Maria Padron.
And Mark Nolte will be absent today. And Commissioner Martin, I believe, was trying to join us electronically. Has she successfully joined us?
I have not seen her yet, but let me.
Well, we have a quorum. Will we somehow know if she's on, or will you?
We should know, yeah.
Okay, so I'll just, once I figure that out, I'll say that so for the minutes that are so when she's present. Well, up to the next item number 3. This is public discussion of any item not on the agenda. So if there's anybody here from the public who would like to address the commission on an item that's not on tonight's agenda, this is your opportunity. Please go ahead and go up to the podium, and you have 5 minutes to address any issue that's not on the agenda tonight. Second call for public comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Under comprehensive plan and zoning code amendment items, agenda item number 4, it's case number CPA 21-0002. Location is southwest corner of Sloth Hour Road in IWV Road. And Kirk, are you Ed?
That'll be me. And before we start, Sarah, the city attorney, is with us. Can you just speak into your mic to make sure that that's working?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so for CPA 21-0002, it is to look at the Southwest District Plan, look at the comprehensive plan, future land use maps, and then amend it from its current designations to intensive commercial, and that is south of IWV and west of Sloth Hour Road. So this application was submitted by MMS Consultants on behalf of the owner. It comes with 2 additional applications as well. So there are 3 applications total. So in addition to the comprehensive plan amendment, it includes an annexation, ANN 21-0003, which would annex 70 acres into the city, and then REZ 21-0006, which would also rezone this land from its current designations of rural residential, where it's within the city, and agriculture in the county, to intensive commercial, and then interim development commercial as well. Currently, the land is used for agriculture, and like I had mentioned, it's part of the Southwest District Plan. So this plan was adopted in 2002. The subject properties are within the Weber sub-area of it. There are 4 areas in the Southwest District Plan, and the future land use that is currently shown is primarily future urban development. But then there's also some single-family duplex residential along Sloth Hour to the east side, and a vegetative noise and site buffer to the west side. The plan does note that some limited residential development may occur west of Sloth Hour Road, but that due to sanitary sewer limitations, extensive development wasn't expected at that time or in the near future. And it also states that residential uses should be buffered from the landfill and proposed US 965 alignment, and that a more detailed plan will be needed when development eventually occurs. So this is the subject parcel. Again, you can see it's west of IWV, which turns into Melrose, west of Sloth Hour Road. It's approximately 80 acres. And it's all ag, as you can see. So you can almost see US 218 to the east there, but directly east is the county poor farm. And again, it's currently zoned county ag. It's got some rural ag to the north, county ag for the rest of it. And then to the east, it has some public uses as well, where there's the poor farm and some other public uses. So I do have a couple pictures of the site as well. The picture on the top left, you can see is looking east at Sloth Hour and Melrose. You can see some of the county properties there. The other is looking the other direction to the west. So you can see it's primarily agriculture. And here are some closer pictures of those facilities along Melrose when you get to the east. So there's the Johnson County facilities, buildings. There's the National Guard Center, which is the bottom right. And then to the right is the poor farm property, which is agricultural. Along the edge of the site as well. I've got a picture looking south on Sloth Hour from Melrose, and then looking west across the property from Sloth Hour. So you can see that there is some topography that's on the site with some hills. And then this is the bottom left is looking north, approximately from where Sloth Hour Road kind of turns. It's right at the edge of the property. You can see the poor farm on the right side in the distance of that photo. And then looking west from Sloth Hour again in the upper right. And then this is looking the other directions. This is looking to the east. So on the bottom left is the poor farm property where you can see those hay bales. And then looking southeast, you can see the residential development that would be to the southeast of the property. So for the proposed amendment then, it has two components, one for the Southwest District Plan and one for the comprehensive plan. And those would be to modify the future land use maps. That's reflected in both of them. And then there's also some text changes to the Southwest District Plan that generalizes the time frame for the US 965 extension, and then discusses intensive commercial uses that may be appropriate along Melrose should the proposed amendment be adopted. So again, this is the site on the Southwest District Plan map from 2002. Again, you can see it's mostly future development. The proposed amendment would change that to intensive commercial. But that doesn't mean that the entire site would be intensive commercial. There would still be, if there are sensitive features on site, those have to be accommodated, et cetera. But the entire parcel would be shown on the future land use map as intensive commercial. And this is the future land use map from the comprehensive plan. So that just reflects that same change should it be amended. So for the role of the commission tonight, there are two general criteria that are used to determine if a comprehensive plan amendment should be made, found at 14.8D3D, and that is that circumstances have changed and or additional information or factors have come to light such that the proposed amendment is in the public interest. And then second, that the proposed amendment will be compatible with other policies or provisions of the comprehensive plan, including any district plans or other amendments thereto. So all of this is laid out in my staff report. So I will try to summarize and compile it in a slightly different way to make it as clear as possible. But starting with that first criteria, looking at circumstances that have changed such that the proposed amendment is the public interest. I wanted to take a step back and talk about current circumstances and what was happening at the time that these plans were adopted. So prior to 1990, the area was pretty undeveloped. There were a few homes on Rurik Road, some public uses, primarily the county poor farm on Melrose. But other than that, there wasn't that much development. By the time the Southwest District Plan was adopted in 2002, housing was continuing to develop west and north of Rurik Road. And at that time, the comprehensive plan was from 1997. So that was the first that actually extended the growth area of the city from approximately Sloth Hour to the proposed future alignment of 965 that follows the Hurt Road alignment to the north, and it would go south by the landfill site. I'll show you an aerial in a minute to kind of lay out where these are. It was also the first, because of that, it was the first to consider the future use of the site. So its future land use map showed it as interim development or rural residential. There was also a policy that was included in that plan and in the Southwest District Plan as well that talks about discouraging commercial uses at the Melrose and 218 interchange. Instead, it encouraged focusing commercial and industrial development at the Highway 1 218 interchange due to concerns from that time that both areas would not be able to have the full development there. So staff wanted to really concentrate it at that south interchange. And that was actually first adopted in the 1983 comprehensive plan. So that policy has been in place since 218 was built around that 1983 comprehensive plan. It also talks about maintaining public uses directly west of the Melrose interchange. And this policy, while not explicitly discussed in the current comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2013, it is reflected in the future land use map showing the site as rural residential, which is similar to the interim development rural residential that was used in 97. And it's also included in the 2006 fringe area agreement, which is a part of that comprehensive plan as well. So as we're talking about development over time and what that's looked like, here you can see the area or an aerial of the site, predominantly west of 218, south of Melrose. I've highlighted the proposed site or the subject property in red. Again, you can see it's mostly undeveloped. There's some early residential subdivisions that are occurring along Rural Road, but there's not much east of the interchange either. Over time, you start to get some additional residential development that crosses 218. This aerial is from 2003, so right around the time that the 2002 plan was adopted for the Southwest District. Since that time, the residential development has continued over time, especially as Camp Cardinal Boulevard was constructed in 2007. And that has included intensification of uses around that US 218 and Melrose interchange. So east of there, in 2016 and 2020, there were 3 comprehensive plan amendments. So that started introducing some commercial uses into the area, specifically office commercial, some higher density residential or medium density residential uses, and then also general commercial in relatively small pockets. To the west, you also have an intensification of uses where there are the public land uses. So the Iowa National Guard Readiness Center came in, the Joint Emergency Communications Center, and the Johnson County Seats Facility. And also housing development has continued, again, west of US 218 and north of Rural Road. So staff does believe that it's in the public interest to explore future uses for this area. The site has basically been in a holding pattern since the 1997 comprehensive plan and that 2002 Southwest District plan, partially because it was assumed that infrastructure would not be available and that would prevent future urban development. However, the application does show that the property can be serviced, and so it makes sense to define what future urban uses might look like in this area. So again, here's that 2003 aerial from the time of the Southwest District Plan. Since then, you start to see the more intensive public uses that have developed west of the interchange. You see continued residential development. And in 2021, what you see today is some more intensive uses to the east of the interchange, and again, continued residential development. And some of those more intensive uses, like I had mentioned before, were allowed by comprehensive plan amendments near this site. Another change in circumstances since the time this plan was adopted has been rapid growth in population redistribution in the Iowa City metro over the last 30 years. So since 1990, Iowa City has grown by about 25%, but other metros have grown by about 3 times their population, especially North Liberty and Coralville. So with that, Iowa City has decreased as a proportion of the metro population. The center of population has shifted to the northwest, and that makes the US 218 corridor increasingly important. And growth is expected to continue, so uses must grow to accommodate demand as well. Thank you. Apparently, if you do see any more of those pop up, let me know. Thank you. In addition,
Sorry, there's one more.
Excuse me, I'm just going to close out of that so I can see it on my screen. They are not showing up currently. Okay, I believe she's back with us now. Okay. Let me know if we have any more technical challenges. Like I said, apparently that's going to pop up on that screen, not mine. So, okay. So with regards to the proposed application, then that's kind of the background on what's been happening since the plans were adopted, some change that has happened since that time. So with the requested application, they have asked to change the future land use of this area to intensive commercial. So intensive commercial has a pretty broad range of uses that it would allow, but it's generally sales and service businesses. It's often characterized by outdoor uses, large scale repair or sales or unenclosed operations. So that does include some limited retail trade. With intensive commercial uses, there is a need to buffer residential uses as well, because it does allow some commercial and light industrial uses. But with regards to intensive commercial uses across the city, taking a look at what land is zoned for intensive commercial, it appears that the current vacant land does not meet the need of all users within the city. So currently there's around 400 acres of intensive commercial in the city. About 13% of that land is vacant. But of that, about 45 acres is expected to develop, mostly small parcels. So you can imagine individual businesses occupying those spaces. Some other zones do allow similar uses depending on what part of the use table that you're looking at. So there are commercial zones. The other ones that are most similar with light industrial uses, I would say, is the general industrial zone. And there is quite a bit of vacant general industrial land as well, but that is primarily positioned to attract railroad users, whereas this site has access to the interstate. So that was a factor in staff's decision. And part of this was that, when this all started, it really came down to Mid-American Energy was trying to locate a new site. And so after looking around the city, they found that none of those intensive commercial parcels met their needs. And so that, brought to mind looking at other areas that might be suitable for that type of use. But it is in reaction to these applications. This isn't a city-led process. And when we're talking about uses generally and what might be appropriate, I have the future land use map on the screen. It's a pretty busy image, but generally yellow is residential, red is commercial, and that purplish color is industrial. So there are three general areas near, that you might accommodate some of these uses. So you can see, especially around the airport to the southwest, that's one of the larger areas that allows light industrial uses. There's the industrial area that kind of runs along the railroad to the southeast. That is another area. Those are kind of circled in that bluish purple color. I believe it's blue. And then on I-80 and Dodge Street to the north, I've circled that in red. That is a commercial area. They all have different challenges. They all have different benefits. The area to the north would require rezoning, would require annexation. The current industrial park doesn't have good highway access. The area near the airport primarily has smaller parcels, which I'll talk about again in a little bit. But the area then to the west is what we're looking at now, which is a relatively small area compared to these other general kind of light industrial areas. In addition, we're looking at future need for Iowa City. So based on MPO projections that we've gotten recently, Iowa City is expected to grow to approximately 94,000 people by 2040. So that is a growth of about 26%. So assuming that demand increases at about the same rate, then we'll need about 500 acres for intensive commercial. And based on what's been planned for in the city, currently we've planned for around 442 acres of intensive commercial. So that does leave a 58 acre gap. But it's actually a larger gap than that because a lot of these intensive commercial areas that are going to be annexed to the city are already occupied either by intensive commercial uses or by other unrelated uses. And there is changing demand over time. And so whether or not we use, the same growth rate as population, it really is a proxy. So it's not like this is the exact amount that we need. It's a way to get a ballpark number for what's an appropriate amount of intensive commercial uses. But staff does anticipate that demand is going to remain relatively stable, unlike other uses related to commercial, where you see declining brick and mortar stores, you see a shift to online stores. And the reason that staff believes it's going to remain relatively stable is because, these sorts of uses often meet some of those demands that would have been met by brick and mortar stores otherwise, especially logistics, transportation, warehousing, those sorts of uses. And staff does believe that, again, Mid-American Energy would occupy a portion of the site, which would meet the uses that are there. So based on that projected demand, based on the site and its access to the interstate, staff does believe that the amendment is in the public interest. And again, that circumstances have changed over time. And so this map was also included in your packet. It kind of shows the areas that have intensive commercial right now. So it shows areas that are currently zoned for intensive commercial that are supposed to stay intensive commercial, show some areas that are currently zoned that are expected to not be intensive commercial in the future. Then it shows areas that are not currently zoned intensive commercial that will be zoned intensive commercial over time. So this is how we came up with what the amount of land within the city would be in the future, that 442 acres that I had previously mentioned. This map also shows vacancy. So as we're talking about current intensive commercial uses, again, we're looking primarily along the US 6, US or Highway 1 corridor, especially at the interchange with 218, north of the airport. We're looking some along Riverside Drive, and then also to the southeast along Scott Boulevard as well. And areas where we're expecting additions of intensive commercial are, again, primarily by that interstate exchange, and then also on South Riverside Drive. But losses that we are expecting are either because they are publicly owned land for sensitive features or north of US 6. We're expecting that to transition into the Riverfront Crossings District. But what that leaves in terms of vacant parcels, there's an area southwest of the airport. There's some small parcels near the US 218 interchange, some small parcels north of the airport, and some small parcels on Scott. But again, generally, there's not that many large areas that remain for this type of development within this zone. So the second criteria that we use to judge comprehensive plan amendments are tied to if it's compatible with the policies and provisions of the comprehensive plan or district plans. And really, this proposal does align with many of the policies in the Southwest District Plan, especially for the Weber South or the Weber sub area. So this area was slated for future development until infrastructure was available. It maintains the transportation vision for the area, which includes US 95 along the west border, Slough Harbor to the east, and Melrose to the north. It allows for contiguous development from Slough Harbor to US 965 and provides a transition from the landfill in US 965 to intensive commercial and then to agriculture/residential uses. And additional buffering for those uses, since I had mentioned that intensive commercial needs some buffering, can be accommodated through rezoning. And it also aligns with other goals or objectives in the comprehensive plan as well. So identifying appropriate locations for commercial development to meet the needs of the future population, identifying land for industrial uses with ready access to rail and highways, and then also targeting industrial and business sectors that align with Iowa City's economic strengths, things like renewable energy or energy in general, advanced manufacturing, and then focusing growth in the city's growth area and trying to maintain that growth area as the place where growth would occur. And this area is within Iowa City's fringe areas, growth area C. And there are also policies affiliated with that are part of the comprehensive plan. So looking at commercial industrial development south and southwest of the airport or along interchanges of paved roads to be annexed prior to development. So again, this is at the paved intersections. It has applied for annexation. And the fringe area agreement, you will be setting a public hearing today, I believe, for the fringe area agreement. That's something that is unrelated. We have to update it because it is expiring, but this policy also aligns with what we're proposing for the future fringe area as well. That being said, there are some differences in the policies that you see in the comprehensive and Southwest District plans. So there is the policy that I had mentioned about intensive commercial, that it does somewhat diverge from the policy against commercial encroachment near Melrose and 218. However, the area nearest the interchange will continue to remain as a public use, and it does meet other goals that are tied to identifying appropriate locations for commercial and industrial development. So staff believes that the spirit of that is met for that reason. And there's also another policy about encouraging new businesses in existing commercial areas. But in this case, again, the existing commercial areas don't seem to accommodate all users within the city that would like to locate here. Again, this was initially considered because of Mid-American Energy looking for a site, not being able to find one. And there is a need for future new intensive commercial uses based on population growth within the city. There are some other policies that I just wanted to mention that would be accommodated through the sensitive areas and site development processes. So especially related to strip commercial development, discouraging walking and biking, and then also sensitive areas. A lot of those are covered, can be covered either through conditions on rezoning or they are also covered by our zoning standards generally, which helps those policies be met. So based on these findings, staff does believe that the proposed amendment is compatible with the policies in the comprehensive plan, but that implementation would require, again, annexation, rezoning, which you'll consider next. And those should include conditions to ensure that the goals of the comprehensive plan are met. We did also receive public comment for this item. I believe that they've all been forwarded to you in advance of this meeting. We didn't. The applicant had a good neighbor meeting. I believe that Ray was in attendance. 4 neighbors attended, and there was discussion along a range of items, but that included the range of uses in the proposed zone, about that being a relatively wide range of uses, about buffers from residences and sensitive features on the site, and then also concern over property values for residential properties that are nearby. In terms of written correspondence, we have 4 that were opposed. 1 due to potential traffic and lighting impacts of the proposed use. 1 due to concerns about the shift from rural residential to commercial, and that's a relatively large change in policy, and that might encourage future commercial development, which might have negative impacts. 1 that is tied to concerns regarding long-term policy in a large area near residences and impacts to residential uses. And they requested that the city slow down to better understand the impacts. And then 1 that noted that the rural residential for the area with the diversity of housing types is one of the reasons that they bought their home, and that the amendment process was not transparent and did not have enough outreach. So taking into account those that public input, staff still recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve CPA 21-0002, a proposed amendment to change the following for around 80 acres of property located south of IWV and west of Slothauer. And that is that the comprehensive plan future land use map designation change from rural residential, open space, and residential at 2 to 8 dwelling units per acre to intensive commercial. And then also for the Southwest District Plan to change the future land use map from single family duplex residential and future urban development to intensive commercial. And also to change the text of the district plan as included in your agenda packet tonight. So in terms of next steps then, your goal is to determine if the proposed plan amendment should be recommended for approval of City Council, which would run concurrently with the annexation of rezoning. And then in terms of council decisions, making the final decisions on it, they would consider the comprehensive plan amendment, we believe, on November 16th. That would be a single meeting, and then there would be 3 meetings on a zoning code text amendment, or a rezoning, excuse me. That would be 2 additional meetings and potentially December 21st. And that concludes staff's presentation.
All right, thank you, Kirk. Any questions of staff by commission members? I'll start off with a couple. So Kirk, so the comprehensive plan for this area was last updated in 2002, so almost 20 years ago, correct?
For the district plan, yes.
Okay. What are some of the current uses of the land to the east and to the north of this area?
So directly east is the county Poor Farm property that is currently used for agriculture, but I believe that they also use the site for events and that sort of thing. To the northeast, there is the facilities building for Johnson County. So it's an outdoor storage of buses. There's some maintenance facilities there, I believe. There's the National Guard Readiness Center is over there, but directly north is agricultural.
And then also present on the Johnson County Historic Poor Farm is the Joint Emergency Communications Center.
Correct.
Yeah, the Chatham Oaks Residential Care Facility and housing for the long-term chronically mentally ill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. What is the distance from the landfill from this how many acres was it? 79 acres?
Ray, do you know that?
It's about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile, depending on where you're measuring.
Due west?
Due west, correct.
Okay. And the roadway through here from 218 out to just past the landfill, that's all being currently improved. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Isn't the landfill west
Southwest.
and south.
southwest from the
Yeah,
property.
southwest. It's not due west.
Correct.
It's-
Southwest.
Yeah.
That's true. Thank you. Questions for staff? Okay, so this is a public hearing on the amendment. I forgot to read this earlier, on an amendment to the comprehensive plan to change the Southwest District Plan and Comprehensive Plan future land use map designations in related plan text from residential open space and future development to intensive commercial. So I'll open the public hearing and we'll start out with the applicant or the applicant's representative. And as they're coming forward, just to, for the people that are not used to these, the applicant usually gets an extended period of time, whereas members of the public, everybody is limited to 5 minutes on their initial round. And for the sake of time, since we have a large agenda tonight, we're going to follow the actual procedures, published procedures. And if people have second round comments, then we'll restrict those to 2 minutes. In the second round, people won't be able to speak until everybody has had their opportunity in the first round. So when you come up to speak, please make sure you identify yourself and give your address. And the point is to address the commission. We can't respond back to you. It's so we can receive your input. And please don't talk back to the audience. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. John Marner with MMS Consultants representing the applicant. Josh Entler with the developer is also present. I'll go ahead and cover a few topics. First of all, thank you to staff. We've worked on this project for, I believe, close to 6 months, somewhere in the 5 to 6 month range. I think staff did a great job with the report, putting that packet together. There was a lot of useful information. I want to highlight one specific item that you touched on. The comprehensive plan and zoning amendments that are being sought are to provide an opportunity for businesses that require close access to not only arterial roadways, but also the interstate system. There's no finalized agreements at this time for any end users. Kirk alluded to Mid-American. That is a possible end user. It's somebody that would fit this classification, but there's nothing finalized at this time. I think we feel this use would.
Jason, can you point your microphone?
Sure.
Because I cannot hear you very well. Okay.
Sure. We feel that this use would be beneficial. As Kirk alluded to, there is a growing need or a future need based on the growth in this area for this type of use in the Iowa City community. Given the way the growth has moved towards the north and west, as he included in his report, and this location with the recent improvements or the ongoing improvements to IWV, this is a natural location, we feel, to provide those uses or a location for these uses that has arterial road access, both on IWV right now. And to your question earlier, Highway 965, the future and I had Highway 965 location that's planned to go alongside the east side of the landfill is at the western edge of this property. So it would provide future access to both Highway 965 as an arterial road and to IWV. And again, it's very close proximity to the interstate system. A few other items, Kirk alluded to the Good Neighbor meeting, some of the questions and concerns that came up out of that meeting, and then also some of the questions and concerns that they've received written comments to. We understand there was a concern about the proximity of this type of use to future residential development in the area. The property, the southern edge of this property has a stream corridor that extends. It doesn't extend directly along the south edge, but it runs close to parallel. There's a lot of sensitive features, wetlands, some wooded areas, stream corridors, as well as a stream corridor that runs north-south along the very west edge of the property. Those items or those features combined with a detention basin that we have currently planned for the property allocate for approximately 370 feet of the total length of depth of the property of 1,300 feet. So it's nearly a third. That's well above the requested or the required buffer for this zoning code from the intensive commercial from residential. It is taking advantage of the natural features that are already in place and then extending them by providing the detention that's required as part of the city's ordinance and utilizing that area to help provide an additional buffer for those for any potential future residential development. We did listen to those concerns as part of that meeting. The original detention basin we had planned did not extend all the way over to Slothhour Road. We did extend it over all the way to Slothhour Road. So that provides a full buffer all the way along the south edge of the property. A couple other items. I think Kirk did a good job of covering some of the changes to the area. There's a lot of growth in this area. Some of the uses that have changed since 2002 when it was adopted was the Joint Emergency Communications Center that was alluded to. The county's current plans, I know they have changed for the Poor Farm for that area since then. And one last item, the traffic flow on Slothhour. Currently, Slothhour terminates just south of Wildcat Lane to the south. There is no connection all the way through to Route Road. I know that was an express concern in the comprehensive plan that it might be used as a cut through. As it develops to the south, there is an opportunity to either through design of traffic control features or rerouting that location, trying to design that Slothhour connection as it moves south towards Raritt to discourage the cut through that the comprehensive plan alludes to. At this time, though, all of the anticipated traffic flow for this type of use, given its proximity to the interstate and those uses desire to be close and easy access to the interstate, they would typically utilize that entrance. They likely would not go to the south. Any potential flow to the south would be likely occur due to residential development that continues as it grows to the south. I'm available for any questions if you have any. Otherwise, thank you.
Any questions from members of the commission for John? Hey, John, I have two quick things for you.
Sure.
So it's a 79.4 acre site, and you said about a third of the site will not be available for development because of sensitive areas in the detention basin. So that's about 26 acres. So that the buffer area will all be to the south. So that whole 26 acres, or will that be distributed throughout?
Kirk, do you by chance have the sensitive areas grading plan available? I can try to describe it, but if he has one of our submitted items available, that would do a much better job of depicting. Describing.
Is it wetlands, critical slopes? What are we talking?
It's primarily a small stream corridor. There's a stream corridor that runs north-south at the very western edge of the property. The zoning parcel, I know we're not into it, but the zoning parcel that's described runs along the stream corridor that you can see on the screen on the western edge towards the western quarter of the property. The buffer I'm referring to with the detention, the natural features are right there where his cursor was.
Okay.
That's the detention basin that we extended further east to try to get it as close to Slothhour as possible. There's additional detention in that southwest corner next to that stream corridor. And then the sensitive features that are located centrally right in the middle of the site along the south boundary. And that's a combination of, again, the stream corridor and wetlands.
Okay. And then also on the question about the extension of 965, I don't follow the Iowa Department of Transportation Commission that closely, but I don't recall that being a funded project.
It's not. Everything that we've alluded to is based on the at least to my knowledge, everything I've alluded to is based on the city's comprehensive plan and long-term
So
planning.
DOT hasn't funded that and no right of way spent up.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I'm just on something like that. How wide would the right of way typically be? You don't need to know the exact answer. I'm just curious.
For 965?
Yeah, for something like that, when if they do extend that, how many feet do they have to?
Typically an arterial is at least 80. Oftentimes it will range up to 100. I know there was discussion mentioned in the comprehensive plan of utilizing that particular right of way to provide possibly some additional green space or to do a little bit of different design there to try to provide some extra screening from the landfill.
Yeah, just trying to do some math in my head of how
Sure.
much land they'll have to try to get for the right of way
Sure.
as it goes through there. Any other questions for John from members of the commission?
I have a question and it's for John or staff. I mean, you spoke of the county's plans for the Poor Farm. And some of the correspondents had said something about the county's plans for the Poor Farm. And we all know plans change, but what are the county's plans for the Poor Farm? Who knows those?
I haven't seen an updated plan lately. My reference to it was primarily the change when the county moved forward with their plan to develop the poor farm in some manner, as opposed to the previous plan that was in place whenever the comprehensive plan was written. The comprehensive plan alludes to some of that ground potentially becoming public, private development and park area. I don't know that that's necessarily in their current plan. The one thing I will add, Kirk will probably touch on this whenever he gets to the zoning application. Some of the conditions is one of the items that was suggested as an amendment or as a CZA was to require S3 screening, so a higher level of screening along Sloth Hour to help with some of the visibility and to help buffer on the east side any potential users here from the Johnson County Poor Farm.
And I can touch a little bit on that plan too.
Okay.
They recently updated their plan. I don't have the map here. If I'm getting back to an aerial. So the Johnson County Poor Farm site is, let's see, the most recent is here. They're showing this, I believe, as continued ag. And if they have residential uses, it would be sort of adjacent to the existing residential uses to the southeast of this site. It wouldn't be directly east of it based on concepts that they've developed, but that's where it would be similar to the location of this, a little closer.
Okay. I mean, I haven't followed it closely, but that was my general understanding that the nature of the poor farm, some of the individual uses may change, but it'd still be pretty agriculture looking. And yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have one. So do we have any idea of the amount of this parcel, this property that Mid-American is interested in using?
It would depend on their total use. Again, if you looked at that parcel that's requested for zoning, the usable space on the previous map that he had up, of the 79 acres, approximately 79 acres that has the requested land use. Kirk, I don't know if you have that number, but if you're probably 20 acres of that is on the west side of the stream corridor. And then, so you're leaving around 60 acres. And then again, roughly a third of that, not quite a third of that is in that buffer area. So the maximum that would be around 40 acres.
Yeah, I think that's about right. It's about 17 west of the stream there. And then, yeah.
And I guess, do we know, I mean, so if there's 40 acres, I mean, is that the size of a parcel they're looking for to use, or are they going to use 10 and we've got 30 more that could?
Again, it's been a preliminary conversation at this point. As far as their interest goes, this goes back to while they're a potential end user, this is being developed in this manner in the requested zoning and comp plan amendment, regardless of their pursuance of the property. It fits the need for the area and an opportunity to provide it in a good location for any type of user.
And at this point, you're saying only Mid-America has given an interest in this area?
I can't speak directly to that. I haven't functioned. I'm not necessarily part of the development team as far as the ownership side. I think there's a chance that there's other parties that are interested. That's just the one that again has been, everybody is aware of, staff is aware of.
All right. Thank you, John. You said, is there another applicant's representative that wants to speak?
Kirk, can you show please the map? If you show the sheet number 1 is the site grading and erosion control. That one has all the sensitive areas. This is a big area of the plot, so I think it will help. Yeah,
So show this one.
yeah.
I can just leave that up.
And there is a part right there, the buffer is very light yellow. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's not showing really very well, but there's like I
Here?
think it's like 100 feet,
Oh, yeah,
the buffer, right?
yeah.
We're not seeing the mouse move.
Yeah.
Oh,
There it is.
There we go.
yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a 100-foot buffer around the wetland there that Kirk's cursor is kind of navigating over there. So that's what you're seeing in yellow. That's the buffer for the wetland.
Well, that's a little bit more visible because it has like a dash black line, but the one on the left, on the strip that goes north to south, that one is the one that I think is very hard to see. Yeah, that one. Yeah, right there. Thank you, Kirk.
All right.
And also, now that we can see your mouse, can you show the map where the poor farm is?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Josh Hentler with IWV Holdings, representing the applicant this evening. To better answer the question about the reservation, John mentioned it was a 350 to 370 foot buffer. We are committed to dedicating that vegetative buffer to make sure there's no structures in that way. And what that equates to is about 20 acres of the 80 acres. The south 20 acres would be reserved as vegetative buffer. Then the other 6 acres comes from that stream corridor going north and south on we'll say the western third of the parcel. So it'd be about a 20-acre reservation to the south. And 350 feet, just to note, is about 7 times the required minimum buffer from commercial to residential. So we wanted to point out that we're doing as much as we can to acknowledge that we heard some feedback at the Good Neighbor meeting, and we want to be committed to providing an adequate buffer on our property to make sure that should the landowners to the south want to do residential, then that they have a fair opportunity to do so. But the main thing,
Excuse me, how many feet did you say? I didn't hear you.
350 feet,
Okay, but how wide will that be 100 feet wide?
the full width of the parcel.
No,
So
no,
the-
no, I mean the buffer.
It'd be 350 feet north and south, and then it would stretch the entire width of the 70-acre parcel. So then the area 350, I forget what that dimension would be, our length and width dimension. Maybe it's on one of the maps. It equates to right at 20 acres of reservation.
Okay.
And then thank you to staff. I forgot to mention that earlier. I know you spent lots of time in research, kind of exploring a variety of different options. We've come to similar conclusions. And really, the point that I wanted to hit on, I don't want to take too much time this evening, is commercial users are looking for larger contiguous tracts of land, not just these little 5 and 10 acre parcels, but looking for opportunities that could be 10 or 20 acre parcels that, as Kirk mentioned, have very convenient or close access to interstate, not only 218, but as we're seeing continued development in the 8380 corridor, this is becoming a growingly attractive location to have some intensive commercial uses. So thank you again to staff for their efforts in the presentation tonight. Kirk, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Any members of the commission have questions for Josh? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing. Now is the opportunity for the public to address the commission on this amendment for comprehensive plan. So if you'd like to address us, please come forward, state your name, give us your address, and limit your comments to 5 minutes, please.
Good evening.
evening.
Excuse me. My name is John Bergstrom, and I represent Slothauer Farms, who own the 100+ acres directly south of the subject property. And my involvement is I'm married to Sherry Slothauer, and her brother Tim is here tonight also. And we've been monitoring things in this area for a while. And we've come to the conclusion that we would like to object to this development. We just don't understand why you are blowing up years and years of planning comprehensive plan zoning for a single 40-acre user. Because this development is going to be the first step of dictating what happens in a large overlay area. This area has always been anticipated to be residential, and now all of a sudden, you know, I read the staff reports, everything that's been planned is being bent to accommodate a 40-acre user, Mid-America. I appreciate the fact that they're having trouble finding a site, but I don't know why you take an area here affects large neighborhoods. It'll affect whatever happens at the county farm, and it just doesn't make any sense. In reading the report, and my comments I think are in your packet, but I would like to address it. You know, the changes that are in place at that intersection right now, you talked about the changes on the east side of the interchange. That really doesn't have much to do on the west side. I mean, that is that natural separation, and the general area there hasn't changed much at all. And the area, again, south of Melrose, I talked to Ann, I talked to Kirk back in February, and I went back through our notes, and the things that jumped out was, you know, it's going to be residential. There's things that have to happen, you know, sewer wise for it to happen, but that's what it's going to be. And also there was a note that there is no commercial entrance. Well, evidently there is by one user. And it's intensive commercial. It's not a good neighbor for residential. And why blow up this entire area? Set the tone. You were talking earlier about defining what an urban user is. Well, intensive commercial is very urban, and it's not a compatible neighbor for residential. There was concern about the buffer. I think you hit it. You know, 965 will be a natural buffer, and I've talked to residential developers, and they don't have concerns with the landfill. They think, you know, it actually provides kind of a natural ending point for a neighborhood. You know, Iowa City appears to be concerned about not having enough intensive commercial in the future. As I looked at the map you showed tonight, you know, there's plenty of land near other commercial areas and intensive commercial areas that I would think there would be land to develop. The current, if I'm correct, the current fringe area agreement says that this type of development should be, in the future, should be south and west of the airport. Well, this certainly is not south and west of the airport. So, you know, as we talked, I can understand, you know, maybe some zoning changes, but not this abrupt one. If this corner was going to be neighborhood commercial or something like that, yeah, it's complementary to the residents that live in country club estates, and hopefully on the land that the Slothauer family owns, and the land to the south. But
John, you're at 5 minutes. Would you just wrap it up now, please?
I can do that. I would just ask, slow this thing down. This is a knee-jerk reaction to a single user, and it's a user that should not be on this corner. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public would like to address the commission on this application?
Hello, I'm Eric Friedman. I live on 4401 Tempe Place. I agree with the former, John, is it? Yeah, I mean, we just heard, there's over 100 families in our community, and then there's several hundred more in the area surrounding Weber School. And none of us really heard about this until we got an email from one person who happened to hear from John. And our board of our housing organization hasn't even had a chance to talk about it yet. It's too fast to allow a democratic process to occur. Another point is that there actually is a plan for historic Poor Farm. I've got it open on my iPad right now. It is not what was on the screen. We need to know what is happening on that site before we make any decisions about what's happening across the street. My understanding is that there's trails being created there. People are going to be able to take walks, and there's forested areas. There's going to be some, I think some housing for some low-income families and some other community farm sites and so on that site. And if we don't know what's going on there, it doesn't sound like the staff has a clear idea of what's happening there. And I think we need to get a better sense of what's happening there before we build across the street. What the community that I live in needs is neighborhood commercial. There's very few supermarkets or restaurants or anything close to us. We need a road that connects Rorit to Melrose west of the highway, so that we can get to places north instead of having to weave all the way around to the east side of the highway through all these back streets. Those things seem to be much higher priority than to make one exception for one company that wants to build there. I'd like to see a better picture of the whole area. Is this going to be the only heavy commercial site that's there? Is there going to be more to the south? Is it going to expand to the north? What's going to happen? I think we need to think about this in a broader light, more long-term, as opposed to this one organization that wants to build one thing in one place. And we need to slow down, and we need to have more democratic conversation among all the hundreds of families that are living there now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to address the commission on this application?
Hi, my name is Jim Larrimore. My family and I live at 1143 Wildcat Lane. From our front yard, we have a clear line of sight to the proposed building site. And what I want to share with you all tonight is that when my family and I decided 7 years ago that we would make our home in that neighborhood, it was only after carefully reviewing the comprehensive plan and reading through every word in the Southwest District Plan. We felt that that was a very thorough, very well thought through plan, and it gave us a lot of confidence for what the future of our neighborhood would be. My opinion is that the current proposals, in spite of the language that was used rather artfully in some of the reports, it is not consistent with the Southwest District Plan. In fact, the proposals reverse key parts of the plan, such as avoiding commercial development at the Melrose 218 interchange and preserving the rural and residential character of the area in question. I take issue with the idea that my neighbors and I should consider intensive commercial development as a buffer to protect our neighborhood when the documents from the city's planning and zoning department include proposed requirements that would buffer us from the impact of the proposed intensive commercial development. If we need to be buffered from the proposed buffer, I don't find it reasonable to consider that intensive commercial development actually acts as a buffer. Excuse me. So I would second the call that I think the process should be slowed down. You should not act on a comprehensive plan in a piecemeal way. If the comprehensive plan is going to be revisited, then do it in an open, inclusive process, the same type of process that was used about 20 years ago to develop the current plan. So that's what I would ask of you. Don't rush a judgment. Don't take a piecemeal approach to a comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the commission on this application?
Hi, I'm Sherry Slothauer Bergstrom, and I'm one of the co-owners with my family of the Slothauer Farm area that butts right up to the property that we're talking about here today. And I just wanted to echo what everybody has said. This has happened really quick. We are the next door neighbors, and we had no idea anything like this was being considered or going on. The city talked about the good neighbor meeting, that there were 4 people there. Well, the reason there were 4 people there is because no one was notified. There wasn't a sign put up on the property. We had to ask about that. And we were told that legally they're only required to notify people within a 300-foot area. Well, when you're in the country, that's not the neighbors. You know, it's so none of these wonderful people that are here from the Country Club Estates area were notified. The people that live in our farmhouse currently, that's right there, were not notified. And we got a distinct impression that there'd been a lot of conversations going on between the city and the developer. You said 6 months. Nobody knew anything. No one was notified about anything. And we felt like it was cooked before it even came to the neighbors. I just want you to think for 1 minute about what this means to the people that live in the beautiful neighborhood, the Country Club Estates neighborhood, which is right across the road from our farmhouse. It's right there. They're going to be looking at large lighting, tall fences, maybe even with security fencing, big trucks, lots of them. And it will be very disruptive. I can't think of a buffer you could come up with, no matter how long it stretches, that is going to help them from the pollution, the light pollution, the noise, and the change to the character of their neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the commission on this application?
Hi, my name is Cindy Cipher. I live at 36 Tempe Court. I don't have a lot to add other than saying that I agree with what my neighbors have said, and just that many of us chose to live there for the specific reason that we had the rural residential mix. My husband and I have the pleasure of looking out on our backyard onto the poor farm and seeing the sunsets from our deck and seeing the dark night skies from our deck. And I understand the need for public use and what might be in the public interest, but I also think there's a balance. And to me, that's not going to be in the right balance for the interest of the public and the people. If we move from rural residential to intensive commercial, that there's tiers there, and that's just leaping too far, too fast. And I can't agree more with Sherry in terms of the ability for us to be part of the good neighbor process. You can see that there's a few of us here tonight. I think there would have been even more that would have come out had we had an opportunity early on to be part of good neighbor discussions. And so I'd like to encourage you, as others have said, to slow down, involve us, involve the rest of the community and many of you who have years of training in the planning process to look closely and honestly at what the plan is for the future. One of the things we all appreciate about Iowa City is the concepts and ideals of transparency and inclusivity, and we've not found that yet here. And but we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. So I'm not saying we're not finding that here tonight, but we want that more in the process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brenda Scott. I live in the Country Club Estates, 1783 Lakeshore Drive. I echo everyone what they're saying here. If you have ever driven out there late at night, go to the end of one of these roads that we're talking about and see how dark it is. I mean, the biggest lights are coming from the landfill. Adding a ton of lights in an industrial area is going to completely change the neighborhood. Another thing to consider as a parent of a West High student that's a young driver that has to head from everything south, goes through Shannon Drive currently. I know there's been talk of doing another road like Sloth Tower was one before Southwest Estates was built. I've heard that they have to route that through Lakeshore potentially, which is where I live. I already live on the corner of Lakeshore and Raritt Road, where there's a ton of traffic, high-speed traffic. Having additional traffic also go through Lakeshore to get to this area. I know you mentioned to the south, you didn't think there'd be much, but no one really knows. And are we talking giant trucks going through a neighborhood filled with kids? Also, because the traffic to the east of this location would be going by West High. The main road to get to West High for everyone down there is Shannon Drive. Turning right to go to West High or turning left to get to Northwest Junior High. If you go there at 8:30, 8:45 in the morning, it's packed. I mean, that street is backed up just trying to get there. You add large industrial trucks into that mix, it's going to cause even more congestion and a dangerous situation for immature drivers. And I don't really understand when they say Mid-American is going to be built there. I don't know what that means. Does that mean like a hub for their trucks? Is it one of those giant energy plant type things? I couldn't tell. It's a very large document to read and I didn't see it. It might be buried in there. So if anyone can answer that too, I mean, just the amount of traffic, the light, and changing the neighborhood, I think it's all happening way too fast. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Tim Slothauer. My family moved out to that area back in the early 70s. And so we lived out there at a time when that road actually went through from Melrose to Raritt Road. At that time, about halfway down, it turned into a mud road. And unfortunately, there's a lot of traffic that uses that road because you talk about the arterials in the interstate, but if you want to go south and then west, the best place to go that direction is south on Slothauer Road. The interstate, if you're heading south and west, is not a direct route to head south and west. So when we moved out there, the road was through and we had constant traffic coming up and down that road from secondary roads. We had 30, 40 dump trucks a day going up and down that road. And at that time, it was a gravel road. And it's really not that much better now than it was back then. So I have two questions. Is there going to be access from this new development to Slothauer Road? Or will all the access be on Melrose IWV? Can anybody answer that?
Tim, this is not a question and answer session. This is your opportunity to share your thoughts and opinions with the
Okay.
commission.
So I was just curious how much traffic would be going down Slough Hour Road if it does get connected to the subdivision. And trying to think of the other question, but anyway, if you have any questions, I've lived on that road for 30 years. And I've seen a lot of changes out there as far as traffic and that kind of thing. And I hate to see it go back to that direction. It's a nice, quiet neighborhood. It should stay that way. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Whoever's next.
Dwayne Cruz. I live at 965 Slough Hour Road. I'm one of the 2 residents that live on Slough Hour. I guess as everybody had stated, it's beautiful out there at nighttime. It's dark, great view of the stars, wonderful sunset. I've grown to love the land. I've got the distinct privilege of Kathy and I of buying the old family farmstead. We got about 3 acres. But over the years, yeah, it's wonderful. We were under the impression when we purchased this that this land in the future at some point in time would be developed to residential. Kathy and I are opposed of this. I think it should be very highly considered. To jump in lightly on this, I think is not wise. A lot of different reasons. I think that one, as everybody stated, you put industrial, heavy industrial is going to want big lights. They're going to want big fences. To my understanding, Mid-American Energy would have a storage facility, which they have one now to the south. That's not very neat and orderly, not very attractive. And I spoke with the developer back there. They have a large buffer strip, but which is very positive. But it changes everything. It changes the environment. You flood the area with lights, as the Johnson County land or the Iowa City landfill has done. The historic farm has started to put up lights, heavy lights that flood the area. It changes things. It really does. We had a magic wand. We just turn it all into a forest, ponds, maybe a park for the public to enjoy. But industrial for a quick sense of purpose, I don't know. I'm going to say I'm opposed. Kathy most definitely is opposed. The 49 pheasants that were in our front yard all winter long last winter are opposed. Our 2 dogs are opposed. Our 3 cats are opposed. But John and Sherry, we love that land. I've grown to love it. I grew up on a farm. To see something in this magnitude, I think you folks really need to consider this. And as everybody has stated here, stop and take pause. Do we really need to change things to this nature? If it was in your backyard, would you want it there? Wind turbines, the most efficient use is out in the ocean. And on the East Coast, communities there say, no, you can't put them here because they're in our backyards because they have political power. Well, maybe we need to consider what's the real purpose here. Why would we change something to this nature? Because as the numbers state, we're going to grow by 26%. Is that a wise move overall? I don't know that answer. But I do know this much from having the privilege of living out there for, I don't know, 5 years or so now. I've grown to love this property for a lot of different reasons. So I plead with you folks in the burden you have to consider this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dwayne. Next.
I'm sorry?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Whoever wants to address us next.
Good evening. My name is Jim Cipher. I live at 36 Tempe Court, and just a couple of points. Number one, I'm pretty astounded that there isn't more understanding or knowledge of what the county poor farms plans are. So another reason to slow down. Secondly, I don't have a master's in urban planning, but the maps showing how where in Iowa City that intensive commercial zoning exists was very, very helpful to me. I think a principle of urban planning is you group and place and approve the proper activities in the right zones. I look at that map and there off in the west corner, a one-off proposal that would need to be zoned that doesn't belong there would be a intensive commercial. And that just flies in the face of what I think urban planning should be all about. And I want to echo my support for everyone else who has spoken before me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the commission? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. We've been at it for about an hour and a half now, so let's take a 3-minute recess.
Sorry. I'll take advantage of that also.
Hey, Sarah, can you just let me know if you're still there?
I'm still here, Kirk. Can you hear me?
Sarah, are you still? Oh, yep, I hear you now. Okay.
Okay,
Just wanted to check.
great.
Thanks.
I'm here. Yep.
I don't want to get into arguing.
has changed.
Yeah, I'll throw up the actual property information viewer. That's generally easier. This is the poor farm.
Oh, okay, so that's the site?
Yeah.
Right there, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay, so let's do that.
If you have questions, although the public hearing is closed.
No, it wasn't a question.
Oh, thank you, great chairman. I don't know what, usually I can get through these things, but man.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. I had a couple pieces of candy on the way here. I don't know. I haven't had dinner yet. That may be part of the problem too. There's nothing absorbing it. Oh, goodness.
If you had candy, you raise your blood
Yep,
glucose,
yep,
which
yep.
your body then wants to deplete that, lower
Yep.
that, so.
Yep, and get rid of it. No. I certainly do. I happened to see a picture of the supervisor chamber the other day. Man, I haven't been in there for a while apparently. That looked pretty snazzy. I don't.
Sure, go ahead. I've tried pretty hard to professionalize things. I believe it's really important to look and act professional.
I was like, that's, yeah, sharp. I'll take tips.
Country Club Estates.
Oh, really? Okay.
His wife.
Oh. Yep.
And here's
Like
this thing on
south.
on the fourth floor.
Yeah, it's one of my areas of responsibility. I'm in
Right, you
charge
have to
on a
take
daily
care of it.
basis for
Yeah.
everything at the
Yeah.
poor farm.
Yeah.
Virtually nothing that was successful.
So nothing's happening right now.
Well, there's a lot happening, but like there are no lights that are there's nothing has been
It's like
operationalized
the
or even planned
area,
for housing.
No, I mean, they're so far away from anything.
Yeah.
We
south
rolled
of the
out there
port.
There's a lot.
Guys, I would refrain from talking about anything on the agenda until the meeting gets started back up again.
Vegetation for small scale farmers, vegetable farmers. But, it's a really cool place, and it's gonna be a beautiful place for all of Iowa City recreationally.
Kirk?
Iowa City being
Natural
94,000
restoration area,
people.
Kirk?
and also for people for gathering.
I could still be alive.
Kirk, can you hear me?
Not quite clear.
Yeah, right.
That's a lot of people.
Any planning that was done.
It'd be double the people when I lived here.
Kirk?
Yep. I agree. That's absolutely true.
I grew up in Waterloo.
No, there's no
Waterloo has been
connectivity
great.
plan there at all. No.
All right, everybody, let's go ahead and call the meeting back to order. So we've closed the public hearing on item number 4, which case number CPA 21-002. Now, in order to be able to discuss the issue, I'd ask a member of the commission to make a motion on this amendment to the comprehensive plan. Remember, we're talking exclusively about the amendment to the comprehensive plan. We're not talking about annexation or rezoning at this point. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So a motion by Sines, is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Townsend. Discussion. So the discussion now is relative exclusively to the amendment of the comprehensive plan on item number 4, case number CPA 21-0002. So the question really before us, as set forth by the rules of Iowa City, is looking at the approval criteria for the amendment to the comprehensive plan to this area. And there's 2 different items in this. My personal opinion is the city has shown that these 2 items have existed. That is, the circumstances have changed and or additional information or factors have come to light, such as the proposed amendment is in the public interest. And of course, that's always our purpose here. What are we looking at? What is best for the city of Iowa City, the entire city? And then the second area is the proposed amendment will be compatible with other policies and provisions of the comprehensive plan, including any district plans or amendments thereto. So I believe both those things are true. So I'll be supporting this application. Other discussion?
I think you made a good point that this piece is just around the comprehensive plan change and that there, other opportunities to put criteria in if anyone so feels the need to as we go through the annexation and rezoning. I've kind of struggled with this a little bit, but I think that the area has changed, and I think the intent of some of the future plans, bringing 965 down on the west side and making it a major thoroughfare, enhance that or indicate that there's going to be even more change in the future. Having driven on IVW Road many times, there's a lot of dump trucks that go up and down that road. I certainly don't think I would call it a quiet residential neighborhood. A lot of dump trucks go there. I am impressed with the buffering that's kind of naturally created in some of the retention ponds, things like that basis. As I look forward to potentially the rezoning, I probably would be inclined to encourage a lot of buffering on the property as a whole. But I feel like the growth of the residential area is coming from the south. I don't know that we're going to see a big developer come out on IVW Road north of the landfill. I don't know that we're going to see a big developer come out next to the county property there. I think the development that has occurred out there west of the interstate has started a trend of use that I think is not inappropriate. Certainly it could be subject to other people's visions, but it seems to be a logical place to kind of continue on with some of that commercial industrial use and continue to focus development to the south for residential. We know that there's a large residential proposal south of Raritt Road. And to be honest, if I had to guess, that's where the growth is going to be of residential in Iowa City in the coming years. I don't know that I see residential really happening along IVW Road. And so I'm inclined to think that the change in the comprehensive plan, based on the changes in circumstances and the community and the needs, warrants approval. And so I think I will be supporting this.
Additional discussion by members of the commission?
And I'm torn because of the intensive commercial in this, what was supposed to be a residential area. So I'm still pondering that, even though you say it has changed and it's going to continue to change, especially with the new development off of Raritt. I'll have to think about it.
I'm supportive of the change. I mean, I think what everybody has said, I think the staff makes the case for the changes that have happened and occurred. And when you drive down Melrose to IWV, that is not a residential neighborhood. And I support this.
I think it's in the immediate area, it's pretty hard to see this as residential with the National Guard Armory,
Right.
the Seat Secondary Roads Campus, the Joint Emergency Communications Center, Chatham Oaks Residential Care Facility. That's just not a residential character of that neighborhood.
To Billy, to your thing, I mean, I do think there needs to be a lot of buffering, and I am impressed with the buffering that is currently proposed. And like I said, I probably won't have any problem suggesting maximum buffering when we get to some of the other phases of this property, but I do think that's key. I want to try to provide as much, but there is quite a bit already there. 300 feet's a lot of buffer.
Yeah.
That's a football field.
Maria?
No, I will not be supporting this.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that that are concerned with the sensitive areas that I'm also concerned with the sensitive areas, and I agree with, I'm concerned about intensive commercial. I don't think commercial is a kind of buffer. And also the poor farm has been used lately to make festival and family activities. And this is too close to the poor farm. And that's the intention or the plan that the use that will have on the poor farm. So I think there are too many concerns for me. And also I didn't like that there weren't enough neighbors in the good neighbor meeting. I think if we could bring more people, that would be better.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor of this application signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
So Townsend and Padron in the negative, is that correct?
Yeah.
So the application is approved 3-2. Next item on the agenda, number 5, case number ANN 21-0003 and REZ 21-0006, location southwest corner of Sloth Hour Road in IWV. My understanding is these two next sub items will be handled concurrently. So A is an application for an annexation of approximately 70.39 acres of land currently in unincorporated Johnson County. And B is an application for rezoning from county agricultural to intensive commercial for approximately 53.36 acres, interim development commercial for approximately 17.03 acres, and approximately 9 acres of land from rural residential to intensive commercial. And Ray, is this yours?
Yes, Ray Heitner, Neighborhood and Development Services. Thank you, Chair. We'll jump right into the presentation here. There's going to be a lot of similarity between this agenda item and the previous agenda item. I'm going to try as much as possible to not be duplicative in the interest of time, but also be thorough and give attention to what needs attention here. So here is an aerial view of the subject property, which was the same as the last agenda item. Overview of the existing zoning with county agricultural in the lime green, strip of rural residential on the east side in tan, and county residential to the north. Here is a look at the fringe area application to the subject property. You can see the majority of the subject property is shaded in that purple coloring, indicating that it falls within area C inside the growth area of the fringe area. Again, there is a little strip to the east that is already in the city limits. Here's a look at the annexation exhibit. The annexation is for a little over 70 acres. And then on top of that is that 70 acres plus 9 acres to the east that is currently in the city limits. That 9-acre strip, along with about 53 acres proposed for annexation, would seek CI1 intensive commercial zoning. And the remaining balance to the west, kind of west of the creek, would seek interim development commercial zoning for about 17 acres. So as was stated before, this agenda item is focusing on the actual annexation application and the rezoning associated with that annexation. As properties annexed into the city, they must assume a zoning application from the city. A couple of things I want to talk about too from just a general background stance. There's been discussion about kind of the lack of attendance at the Good Neighbor meeting for neighbors in attendance. Those notices were sent out pursuant to the city's current requirement of a 300-foot notification radius. I was in attendance at that meeting, and we made a concerted effort in notification of this meeting and for the neighbor notifications to send out notifications to residents within the Country Club Estates 4th and 5th editions as well. So even though they're outside that 300-foot customary notification window, we understood that there's a potential for a larger impact outside of that buffer area, especially when you're looking at dealing with larger agricultural properties. So just wanted to make a note of that. And then we did hold a consult on the annexation July 29th with 2 Union Township trustees. They voiced concerns mostly about the potential loss of farmland and any tax revenue to the township. This is just an overview of the existing Southwest District Plan application from the Weber sub area. As Kirk mentioned, the majority of this area is slated for future urban development with kind of that strip that's in the city already for single family duplex residential. And then also kind of a shown vegetative and noise and site buffer to the west, right near the landfill. So for the annexation component of this, voluntary annexations are reviewed under 3 different criteria, which I'll go into a little bit more detail on. First, that the area under consideration falls within the adopted long-range planning boundary. Second, that development in the area proposed for annexation will fulfill an identified need without imposing an undue burden on the city. And third, that control of the development is in the city's best interest. So on that first point, with the area under consideration falling within the adopted long-range planning boundary, as I went over before, Kirk went over, the portion of the subject property that isn't already in the city limits is all entirely within the city's growth area in Fringe Area C. It's anticipated that anything within that growth area will eventually or could eventually be annexed into the city. So that point is satisfied. Number 2, that development in the area proposed for annexation will fulfill an identified need without imposing an undue burden on the city. The applicant has demonstrated that sanitary sewer service is possible to the eastern properties that are seeking the intensive commercial CI1 zoning. There are capital improvements underway on IWV Road. I think this was discussed a little bit in the previous agenda item with the intent of bringing the road to urban arterial standards. That will include a mill and overlay of that segment of the road roughly between the Poor Farm and Hebel Avenue to the landfill, as well as installation of a water line throughout that segment of road. with the expectation that, you know, that water line and that stretch of roadway will be utilized for those infrastructure improvements. As was discussed in pretty great detail in the previous agenda item, you know, there is a great deal of highway adjacency, lot size, and also arterial proximity that makes this subject property pretty appealing for future commercial development. And then also just kind of hearkening to the comprehensive plan, the subject properties are contiguous to the city limits, thereby satisfying that goal for annexation. And then that last point, control of the development is in the city's best interest. As I mentioned before, this property is within the city's growth area. It is appropriate for properties seeking annexation upon development to seek adequate city services. This is especially true for kind of commercial and industrial oriented uses that may develop within the growth area. It's kind of a longstanding policy that the city tries to direct those uses within the city limits, if possible. Here's an overview of the zoning again. So you can see the eastern parcels, maybe you can see that, are looking for intensive commercial zoning with the western parcel seeking interim development commercial. So just kind of an overview of that CI1 zone. This, you know, as was stated before, this is a zone with a lot of depth to it. The purpose of the zone is to provide areas for sales and service functions, businesses whose operations are typically characterized by outdoor display, storage of merchandise, repair and sales of large equipment or motor vehicles, outdoor commercial amusement and recreational activities. So it's an extensive zone, and there's a lot of discussion within the zoning ordinance about, you know, how to perhaps buffer some of those uses from adjacent residential zones, and I'll touch on that a little bit here in a moment. So when examining the zone, I know there's been a lot of talk about Mid-American being a potential end user here. It's certainly a possibility, but when we're assessing a rezoning like this, you know, we have to analyze the potential for any kind of use that might be permitted within that zone. So there's really kind of three different ways you can look at kind of what zone or uses may exist in a zone. We have uses that are permitted by right, meaning that you know, if they follow all of the other items and steps within the zoning or subdivision ordinance, they are permitted without any further scrutiny. There's provisional uses, which require a few more steps and criteria to satisfy. And then there's uses permitted by special exception, which require even more criteria to satisfy and have to obtain that special exception through our Board of Adjustment, so an entirely different review body. This is just a quick overview of some of the uses that are permitted through each mechanism. You know, by right, you could have building trade, commercial, recreational, eating establishments, office, retail, industrial service, self-service storage, warehouse, freight movement. Provisional uses, which again require a bit more criteria to satisfy, adult businesses, animal related commercial, some general manufacturing, basic utility. And then when you go on to uses permitted by special exception, you get into uses that kind of deserve a bit more analysis and scrutiny, perhaps. when you get into things like heavy manufacturing, basic utilities that maybe are outside, detention facilities, utility scale, ground mounted solar. So just kind of a brief overview of some of those potential uses. The IDC zone to the far west is intended to provide areas for managed growth. It's a default zoning district that's often applied to undeveloped areas until city services can be provided, as is the case with this portion of the subject property. So for the rezoning component of this, there's two criteria that need to be satisfied. There's consistency with the comprehensive plan and compatibility with the existing neighborhood character. With respect to consistency with the comprehensive plan, a lot of that is tied to kind of the previous agenda item and whether intensive commercial designation within the comprehensive plan is passed. But I will say what is existing right now is classified as future urban development. Again, I'm just going to touch on kind of the attractiveness of the site for a couple of reasons: the highway adjacency and future arterial road access. This is another graphic that sort of just illustrates what a full build out of the adjacent roadway infrastructure may look like. The subject properties are kind of shown in that kind of teal color. As I mentioned earlier, there are improvements ongoing right now to IWV Road to make that an arterial to urban design standards. It's been discussed already tonight about the potential for the 9665 extension that would be on the kind of west side of the subject property, closer to the interim zone area. And then in the comprehensive plan, there is plans for making Slothhour Road a collector street, which is kind of a step down from an arterial, assuming less traffic than an arterial, less right-of-way width, but still more than more volume and more right-of-way than you would see in kind of a local neighborhood street. So upon development of this area, it's expected that will assume a collector road status. With respect to compatibility with the existing neighborhood character, Kirk already kind of touched on the lay of the existing land. I don't want to spend too much time in that. I just wanted to highlight this kind of pictometry image I have here. Again, already discussed in the last meeting about these sort of lighter industrial uses to the northeast of the subject property, the Poor Farm directly east, the kind of agricultural residential to the north, and then not seen on this image. This is about as wide scale of an image I could get on the pictometry, but you know, obviously the Country Club Estates residential to the southeast as well. So we do understand that there's definitely concerns with potentially having a zone with sort of the breadth of uses that a intensive commercial zone presents, and being as sensitive as possible to existing neighbors and adjacent properties. So there are a few conditions in that respect that staff would recommend for rezoning. The applicant team kind of touched on one of these already, but we are recommending an S3 high screen landscape buffer along the property's Slothhour Road frontage. That is our most intense screening that we have within our code. It consists of about 6 foot tall, dense shrub and or tree buffer with potential to incorporate berming with that buffer or masonry wall as well. To that end, we are also recommending a condition that any parking along the IWV road frontage be screened to the S3 standard as well. And that any loading areas and outdoor storage be located behind the principal structure. There's also some built-in sort of criteria that I touched on a little bit earlier for buffering that's use specific. And I don't want to go through all of those, but some of the kind of probably more intense uses that might fall under this zone. I wanted to just kind of touch on what the code already prescribes in terms of buffering for those uses. So heavy manufacturing, which is limited to, I should say concrete mix plants, not plats, would require at least a 500-foot buffer from any residential zone. General manufacturing has a size limitation of about 15,000 square feet. And there's certain protocols for what production could take place out of that general manufacturing. Detention facilities must be at least 1,000 feet from any residential zone. And then communication transmission facilities, towers have to be set back at least the distance equal to the height of the tower from any residential zone. So this is the slide that was shown earlier with the environmental sensitive areas. We did request that the applicant submit a sensitive areas plan as a part of our review of the annexation rezoning. It's already been discussed, the degree of sort of natural buffering that will take place kind of on the south side of the subject property, spanning the entire width of the property. And again, that's largely because of a combination of planned detention, which sort of falls into place given the topography, and then also the stream corridor that's kind of on the south end of the property, as well as a wetland a little bit under an acre in size on the south end of the property, and an associated 100-foot buffer around that wetland. So, there will be that natural buffering on the south side of the subject property that effectively prohibits, any urban development from taking place within that area. A couple points on traffic and access to the site. Right now, the most recent vehicle count that we have for IWV Road is approximately 2,000 vehicles per day. This is well below an arterial of that size capacity of about 17,000 vehicles per day. We are looking to finalize access to the site upon site plan review. However, there is a city code policy on limiting access to arterial roads, and it is the city's preference to have that primary access point off Sloth Hour Road. So I think there was a question earlier in the evening about, would there be an access off Sloth Hour Road? Yes, there would be if this went forward. There's a few conditions related to that access that I want to go over briefly. One, that improvement of the applicant would be obligated to improve Sloth Hour Road to the southern end of that proposed access, and then contribute a 25% toward the cost of upgrading the remaining portion of Sloth Hour Road along the rest of the frontage. We will also be requesting a dedication of approximately 13 feet of additional right-of-way along the Sloth Hour Road frontage. Again, just want to briefly touch on the public comments section. I know Kirk did a good job kind of going over this. Concerns with the annexation and rezoning, I would say are largely similar to the concerns related to the comprehensive plan amendment, where general concerns about kind of the wide ranges of uses in the proposed zone, concerns about buffers and impacts to sensitive features, as well as any detrimental property valuation to adjacent residences. Concerns about negative externalities from the use of traffic and lighting impacts, kind of large shift from kind of a rural residential character to that of a intensive commercial, lighter industrial character, and then potential implications for kind of the larger area. So with respect to the annexation policy, the role of the commission tonight is to determine that the following are satisfied conditions by the comprehensive plan's annexation policy. One, that the area falls within the adopted long-range planning boundary. Two, that development in the area proposed for annexation will fulfill an identified need without imposing undue burden on the city. And three, that control of the development is in the city's best interest. With respect to next steps, after this commission meeting, pending approval, the city council would set a public hearing for both the annexation and rezoning. Prior to the public hearing, there is kind of an extensive notification process that has to take place with utility companies before that public hearing occurs. City council will consider all three items, the comprehensive plan amendment, annexation, and rezoning. I think Kirk had mentioned that right now that would be scheduled for a November 16th hearing date by the council. And if that seems kind of far off, it's because there's certain state requirements with notification that we need to follow there. And then because the annexation area is within 2 miles of another jurisdiction or municipality, we do have to send this application for annexation to the state's city development board for consideration and approval, which is kind of another review process at the state level. So staff is recommending approval of annexation 21-0003, voluntary annexation of approximately 70.39 acres of property located south of IWB Road and west of Slothhour Road. We're also recommending approval of the rezoning of 21-0006 of 53.36 acres from county agricultural to intensive commercial, 9 acres from city rural residential to intensive commercial, and 17.03 acres from county agricultural to interim development commercial, subject to the following conditions. One, that prior to issuance of building permit, the owner will plat the property to be rezoned to the zoning boundaries shown on the rezoning exhibit. Submission of a landscape plan, which will be approved by the city forester to ensure that when developed, the subject property is designed in a manner that emphasizes green components with its location along an arterial as an entryway to the city. And that the owner shall contribute 25% of the cost of upgrading Slothhour Road south of the proposed access to Collector Street standards adjacent to the subject property. And then also prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy on the property fronting Slothhour Road, installation of a landscaping screen to the S3 standard as detailed in the city code along the property's Slothhour Road frontage. Improvement of Slothhour Road to the southern end of the proposed access off Slothhour Road. And then a couple more conditions at the time of final plat approval. Owner shall dedicate approximately 13 feet of additional right of way along the Slothhour Road frontage as approved by the city engineer. And then lastly, that any parking between IWV Road and the principal structure shall be screened to the S3 high standard. In addition, loading areas, outdoor storage shall not be located between the front facade of the principal structure and the front yard right-of-way line, essentially behind the building. So that concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Ray. Now is the opportunity for the members of the commission to ask questions of staff regarding these applications. So we're talking specifically about the annexation and the rezoning. So I wrote 3 questions down, Ray, while you were talking. One, when you were talking about the uses permitted by right and provisionally and by special exception. For the special exceptions, is it correct that those would have to go before the Board of Adjustment to get approval from the Board of Adjustment? So there'd be no administrative course for that. They would have to go Board of Adjustment.
Right.
Because some of those uses sound pretty intensive.
Yeah,
And-
absolutely. Yeah, anything requiring a special exception will require a Board of Adjustment.
Because I heard a couple of the public speakers intermix industrial zoning with intensive commercial zoning. And we're not talking about any industrial zoning tonight. We're just, the heaviest zoning is intensive commercial, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The other question, actually more an observation, because I haven't seen this stated or anywhere, and maybe I missed it. Slothauer Road is currently a county level B road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that means that there's zero maintenance going on and it's essentially traversable at this point by a regular motor vehicle. It's level B, so the county provides no maintenance for the entire length of that road. And then my last question, under the additional conditions added to the staff's recommendation, the recommendation was that there should be S3 standards applied for the landscaping along the length of Slothauer Road. I'm curious why that wasn't extended to the length of IWV Road, since that is an entry area to Iowa City. Is that members of the commission have been on it for a while? We'll recall the discussion on Highway 1 of the property just north of the area of the old Menards building, when we particularly talked about the importance of making sure that mature trees were maintained, because we're concerned about making sure that we have these very green entrances to Iowa City. So was there any consideration given to have S3 standards for that length of IWV? And if not, that's something I'd be interested in adding.
Yeah, I would say there was consideration given to it. I think if it's the commission's desire to amend a condition or create a new condition that would require that S3 screening on the IWV road frontage, I think staff would be supportive of that. I would say our focus with respect to IWV road was just making sure that any kind of parking within that front yard area off IWV road was screened, but I think we would be totally supportive of extending that screening throughout the entire IWV road frontage.
Not only am I concerned aesthetically, but since I'm quite certain the engineering staff would recommend limitation of accesses onto IWV from this named property, that we're not going to have driveways anyway. So why not have this look like a aesthetically pleasing area?
Sure, sure. Yeah, and that also, I mean, goes to further satisfy a comprehensive plan goal about having kind of aesthetically pleasing, beautified entries into the city. So I think staff would be supportive of that.
Other questions for staff from commission members on these 2 particular applications, annexation and rezoning?
I did appreciate the review of the various uses, this by right, this provisional, the special exception that did answer some of my questions. I would definitely be supportive of extending the S3 screening standard, the entire length of IVW road side of that property. one of the things that we seem to be bumping up against a lot lately in the last year of applications that have come before the commission is that there's a common theme of not wanting change and not wanting growth. For those folks that are here tonight to speak against growth in this area, if you stick around a little bit longer, you're going to hear the folks that are going to speak against growth on the south side. We talked with all the folks on the northeast side of town here a couple times in the last 2 years about the fact that they didn't want their natural areas to grow. It's really got me thinking and begging the question, where are we going to grow if nobody wants to grow? I think we saw in the paper, in the news, I don't know if it's the paper, but in the last week that the official census estimate for Iowa City showed that the growth was less than expected, while the growth in our neighboring communities was way more than expected. And I think, I'll be honest, I think there's a reason for that, is because they want to grow, and we as a community, at least part of the community, doesn't want to grow. Nope. Sorry.
This is our time to talk.
I'm seeing this trend and it's starting to concern me. I don't know if, I think to your point earlier that we have to look, our role is to look at, the good of the community as a whole. And I think I'm not opposed to change. I think as I said earlier, we've seen change happen on this IVW corridor. I anticipate that that's going to continue. The demand for that's going to continue regardless of any decision that's made tonight. I personally think that, quite frankly, if I had to choose between that and Raritt Road or the 230 some acres south of Raritt Road, this makes the most sense to put in some type of a heavier use of zoning so that we can have some of those types of businesses and industries on that side of town. It's really the only place that seems logical for me to put it. So I like the staff's conditions. I totally support those. I would support extending the screening on IVW Road. But I think I'm inclined to support this, and I definitely am inclined to support this annexation. And I'm comforted by the use, the chart that showed the uses of the zoning. I'm more inclined now to support the zoning in general, rezoning.
Any other questions for members of the commission for staff on these two applications?
I'm sorry, I was out of order on that with my.
Well, I just didn't want to interrupt you. All right. Now we'll go ahead and open the public hearing on items number ANN 21-0003 and REZ 21-0006. And as our tradition by practice, we'd ask first for the applicant or the applicant's representative to come forward if they'd have anything they'd like to add in addition to what they previously stated.
Thank you. Just two quick items to add. One, we would also support the extension of the SC screening along IWV to propose that or to add that condition to the other conditions that were listed. The other thing we wanted to add is just to reiterate again that this zoning amendment is being sought not just for one user. There's an opportunity for multiple other businesses, whether they've expressed interest at this point or not. This is a great location to provide quick access to the arterial road for these types of uses, and then immediate access to Highway 218 and the interstate system. As staff's pointed out, there's not a lot of those types of properties in the area. If they are, they're located away from the highway or from the interstate, or they're on the east part of town, located near railways or different uses, or they're smaller parcels as well. Anything that does exist is typically 2, 3, 5 acre parcels. And a lot of the people that are interested in this type of property for this type of uses are searching for something more in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 acres or a little larger property. And those properties simply don't exist in the Iowa City area at this time. So this is a great location for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Josh, do you want to add anything? Okay, thank you very much. Now, if any members of the public would like to address the commission on these two application items. Again, same rules. If you have something new to say, limit your conversation to 5 minutes, please. And please just address the commission. And refresh us with your names.
John Bergstrom.
Hi, John. Thank you.
And I just want to make the point, we're not anti-growth. We just don't like the abrupt, the change in the land plan. And I don't think I was hearing anti-growth. It's always been deemed to be residential, and I think it should continue. And as far as north of Melrose, extending, frankly, this development would probably fit more north of Melrose. But as you turn onto Slough Road, that's going to be, that should be residential. Just or neighborhood commercial, something like that's in tune. I mean, that, because as you go south, it's residential, and the county farm, frankly, I believe will have a residential component to it. So again, just ask, it's a big change. And I think you guys, as you change an instrument like the comprehensive plan, it should be much more encompassing than accommodating Mid-America Energy, because it's very clear in all this comments, staff comments, this is what this is all about. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Just so everybody knows, it's immaterial to me what the potential users of these properties are. I strictly look at the application, what the applicant says. I'm completely Switzerland on Mid-America or whoever's there, just so you know that. Any other person like to address the commission?
My name is Eric Friedman. Could you put the view up on the screen that shows the relationship between the new annexation and existing development in the area?
Location map.
We needed a little more zoomed out. There you go, back. That was it.
This one?
Here you go.
Okay.
Okay. So I heard a couple of the commissioners say, this is not a residential area when you drive west on Melrose. But that's not the concern. The concern is the views from the south and what this impacts to the south. If you look at this map, there's a ton of people living right across the Poor Farm from this property, which you could easily see from any of those streets that are ending right on the Poor Farm. It's a clear line of sight. There's also, if the Poor Farm is going to be a community resource with trails and some housing and community farming, then you're going to have a wall and a row of trees or shrubs or something that are like 6 feet high right next to it. And then behind it, I don't know how big it is. I have no idea what it's going to look like. It'd be nice to even at least see something that would show us what it's going to look like when this is built to the west of the Poor Farm. So there is concern, I think, among people who live in this neighborhood, vibrant neighborhood, of what the impact would be. I don't think any of us are opposed to annexing more land and creating space for things that are useful to the city, but we don't understand why it was chosen to be here without looking at other options. Why not north of Melrose? What's the long-term plan? Is this going to be one little tiny piece? But then we're still left with, where is there going to be expansion for other intensive commercial? Is there a plan for that? We haven't seen it. All we've seen is this one proposal for this one thing. And that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'd like to know more in order to be able to make a clear decision. I don't know how we can make a decision on this, given what we've heard so far.
Thank
I
you,
think,
Eric.
for example, something along the east side of that space that was more compatible with what and useful to the people living there. If you want, nobody wants to live next to a dump, of course. So if there's going to be stuff farther west, fine. But I think people are concerned about along Slothtower Road that is directly next to where people live.
Thank you, Eric.
So again, thanks for making time to hear us out tonight. My name is Jim Larrimore. My family and I live at 1143 Wildcat Lane. So we are one of the families that looks across that field at the proposed site. Since one of the commissioners made some comments that I interpreted as being directed at those of us who are here in attendance, I hope you'll indulge me for a second in saying that I think it's interesting sometimes that we can hear the same words or be exposed to the same words and hear such dramatically different things. I have not heard a single one of my neighbors express a concern about growth. Some of us came to Iowa City and contributed to the growth of the population here. So I don't think that anyone is anti-growth from what I've heard so far. I think that we do have some concerns about what is planned or what is potentially going to be, for some of us within a very long stone's throw of our neighborhood. And the thing that I would point out here, where I think I heard some things tonight that are worrisome to me. Actually, there's one thing that I read in the documentation that was posted online, is that I think there is a reference in some of the material that you all have received that suggests that the plan for the county and the poor farm is that they're actually considering putting some residential units there, right? Which would be very, very close to the proposed site that you're considering. I think that that creates a much more immediate conflict between the kinds of uses for these properties. The thing that I am very concerned about, because I think there were also comments that none of us has a crystal ball. We really don't know. There's no plan from Mid-America Energy. There's no confirmed use for the site, but there is, beyond the rights that can be exercised to build on that site, subject only to provisional review, what was referenced as an adult store or adult video stores or strip clubs. That's what your code says. So by opening up the door for intensive commercial use on this property, not very far from one of Iowa City's high schools and not very far from our residential neighborhoods, there are possibilities that I think none of us would really want in our own backyards.
Thank you.
This is Cindy Cipher. I just want to follow up with that comment. You had indicated, and I'm sorry, I don't remember people's names, but you had indicated that you're not concerned if it's Mid-America or who it is that builds there. You're looking at what's in the best interest of Iowa City and the public. And I think it's really dangerous to annex and start to allow that land to be used in a way that we don't have a plan for. We don't know what the future will hold for that land, but what we do know is what is near it. And you had indicated, I'd heard that it isn't residential, but I would assume that the residents of Walnut Ridge and Galway Hills would beg to differ because they would find themselves pretty close to that area. We would find ourselves close to that area. And for us, again, that's where I think we need to be looking at tiers rather than jumping straight from residential to intense commercial. Once it is intense commercial, that's what it is. And all of those options exist in terms of what could go in that land. So it makes it really hard to feel comfortable with what the future might hold. And again, I will echo, none of us are against the growth. We wanted residential growth, or at the very least, maybe some neighborhood commercial growth. We just don't think an appropriate use from our standpoint. And I understand there are differing opinions here, but intense commercial. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sherry Bergstrom. I have to say, if you look at that map, I feel like the panel here maybe doesn't have a good understanding of that area. I'm hearing you talk a lot about IWV Road. The people that are here and the big impact that you're missing is what's going to happen south of there. You know, there's a big strip of land there. And this small piece of land that we're addressing tonight is going to set the tone for what happens in that whole area. And it really concerns me and bothers me a lot that I feel like the people on the panel are not really understanding of that. And, you know, maybe not real familiar with the area. But the IWV road is probably not what you should be thinking about here. There is going to be impact in the future from this decision you're making tonight on a large area of agricultural land and on a lot of people. And, you know, look at that neighborhood there and look at what's going to happen in the future on that agricultural land. And what you're deciding here for a very small plot is going to impact that greatly.
All right, thank you. Next. Welcome back.
Dwayne Cruz, 965 Sloth Hour. And as Sherry just pointed out, the decision that's being imposed on you folks tonight here does impact a lot of people, and it's a very large decision. When you drive up and down IWV, as Sherry said, yeah, you see commercial, but you get past that, there's a lot of land there. That is going to be impacted by this decision if we go with heavy industrial. And I'm not opposed to growth either. I mean, we all want to grow, we all want to be successful. But I also think if you make this decision in favor of the heavy industrial, you're opening Pandora's box here, and you can't close it once it's opened.
It's not heavy industrial.
What's that?
It's not heavy industrial zoning. I'm just correcting you there.
Okay, but I'm just saying opposed. Kathy's opposed. Our 3 dogs are opposed, or our 2 dogs are opposed. Our 3 cats are opposed. And the 49 pheasants in our front yard last winter are opposed too.
All right, thank you. Next. Hey, John Marner, could I ask you a question? I should have asked you earlier. What's the CSR for this land? Do you know off the top of your head? 'Cause I just heard several people mention about agricultural land, so I suppose that should be in the record. If you don't know, that's fine.
I do not
but
know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
I presume it's around 50 or so, but I don't, 50 to 60, but
Yeah.
I think
Sorry, what's a CSR?
corn suitability rating?
I think I saw something in the low 70s maybe.
Okay.
So fairly, oh, is
50?
that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I presume it'd be the same as the poor farm, and the poor farm CSR is low. It's around 50, so that's where I got that number. So, okay, thank you. sorry to call you up on that. I just thought it was an important number for people to know. Okay, last call for public comment. If somebody would like to speak for second round, you're more than welcome. You have 2 minutes.
I just have a quick question. There was a mention in the conditions for the plan that the resident would pay 25% of the improvements to Slossower Road to the south of the site. What is the vision there? Is that the idea that that would extend all the way down to Royal Road, or that it would connect up to Lakeshore?
Yeah, this is not a question and answer opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to address us and give us information.
Okay.
So I think all I could say is what's in the packet, 25% is, you could certainly ask staff after this.
Okay, then I'll just say this. I think that if the idea was that that collector road was going to feed onto Lakeshore and not go all the way down to Rorit, would be tremendously opposed by many, many people in the community, because then you'd have lots and lots of traffic going right through a street where there's tons of kids. So if there's thinking on here about creating a collector road, I think there's got to be a very careful analysis of where that collector road is going to go to. I would think it should go to Rorit. I haven't spoken to my neighbors that live on Slossower about that, but I think we would need to think very carefully about where that would road connect to. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else for a second round?
CSR
72. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
The internet's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yes, great. Just so people know, it's a scale 0 to 100. And the closer you get to 100 is prime ag land. And as it goes down, it's lesser value. And that determines how it sells, frankly. Any more second rounds? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Could I have we're going to consider these separately, even though we had the presentation concurrently and the public hearing concurrently. So could I have a motion for item 5A, please, so we can discuss it?
So moved.
Motion by Townsend. Is there a
Second.
Second by Sines. Okay, so this first thing here is we're talking about this annexation of approximately 70.39 acres. So it's always very important to look at what our job is tonight. So now we're talking strictly about annexation. So discussion about rezoning is not appropriate for this. So what we're down to here is we need to analyze 3 criteria that's in the annexation policy. So it's number 1, the area under consideration falls within the adopted long-range planning boundary. Number 2, development in the area proposed for annexation will fulfill an identified need without imposing an undue burden on the city. So we're really talking about city services, the ability of city to service this with utilities and other services. And 3, the control of the development is in the city's best interest. And really, that's why we're always here, to look at what's best for the city. I completely empathize with everybody in this room. I live on the south side of Iowa City. There's been a lot of zoning actions that have been taken adjacent to my property that I did not agree with and I did not like. But that's just the way it is. Other people make these decisions. Sometimes they're in our favor and sometimes they're not. I look at this strictly. I've been doing this for 7 years now. And so on these annexations, I think it's usually pretty straightforward when you look at these 3 criteria, because I get a reminder again, we're not talking about rezoning at all. It has nothing to do with the conversation right now. We're talking about annexation. I think all 3 of these criteria have clearly been met. I don't even think it's close. So that's my personal opinion. That's how I'll be voting.
I would agree. And thank you for separating the 2, because I think that was a very important thing. I was going to request that actually. So I am very much supportive of if a property owner wants to bring their property into the city and add value to the city.
Thank you for bringing that up. The city's policy is it's only on voluntary annexations on the owner of the property. So the owner of this property wishes to be annexed into Iowa City.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anytime we have that situation, I personally think we need to, look pretty favorably upon it, as long as it's not going to create some some detriment to like city services or resources or things like that. So I'm definitely in support of the annexation.
Further discussion?
I do agree with both of your comments.
Maria?
Yeah, I support the annexation.
Thank you.
I
Susan?
support the annexation.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of this particular application on annexation, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, the application is approved 5-0. Now, we get on to the one that I'm sure is the most contentious one. So we're looking at 5B. We're actually looking at an application for rezoning from county agricultural to intensive commercial for 53.36 acres, interim development commercial for 17.03. And just so people know, that's very common for anything that's ag land that's going to be developed in the future. It almost always goes to interim development first as sort of a holding zoning until a use gets identified. And then approximately 9 acres of land for rural resident, from rural residential to intensive commercial. So my math, if it's correct, shows 62.36 acres going to intensive commercial and 17.03 acres into interim development commercial. Discussion. First, we need to have a motion for approval.
So moved with the proposed conditions that staff outlined and the addition of the extended screening standards along the entire length of IVW.
That particular standard S3?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Very good. So we have a motion
Second.
and a second by Craig. Discussion. This is the hardest part. And no one, I presume in the audience, will like what I have to say. We have to look at what's best for this entire city of Iowa City, not for particular areas. I've heard every word you've said. I've listened carefully to you. And I understand exactly why you feel the way you do. But our job is to make decisions that's on best for the entire city of Iowa City. I personally think Mr. Sign's comments were correct, that there seems to be a real strong, and I'm not accusing anybody in here of this, of anti-development in Iowa City, because we've gone through some really rough public hearings for development on the east side by Hickory Hills, on the south side for the new zoning standards. You know, somebody's got to pay property taxes. Somebody has, the land has to be developed for the people that want to live here. People keep moving here. They got to live somewhere. They got to work somewhere. So we have to make really hard decisions that are pretty thankless, to be honest with you. And I don't expect anybody to thank me. I volunteered to be on this and I've been appointed and reappointed. So, you know, I'm here to take it. So at the end of the day, I got to look at, is the comprehensive plan being complied with? Are the district plans and the sub-district plans being complied with in general? Because this is subjective when you're talking about comprehensive plans and district plans. And then in a particularity, are the development ordinances being followed? That's our role. And I view it pretty literal and pretty much take out my personal feelings in a lot of things. Sure, there's some subjectivity, but mostly our job is, are the rules being followed? And is the intention of the plans being followed? And the answer for this is, to me, is yes. I wouldn't like it if I was a neighbor. I get it. I completely get it. I disagree with you on the area that I do believe this is, the residential is farther to the south. And I think the developer, I would be thrilled, we've done this a long time, to have a developer voluntarily without coercion want to have 1/3 of their property be a buffer. I mean, I know this is a one-time thing for you folks, but this is a regular every meeting for us. And this is a great deal. This is really good. And so I will support this without reservation. Further discussion.
I also support the rezoning. I would not support it if it came further south, but I think it's in keeping with what is going to be, when you think that 965 could come down between the landfill and this property, you aren't going to be building residential houses to your west. Because like, I mean, someone already said they don't want to back up to the landfill. Well, residential houses, they don't want to live on 965 either. So there's going to be something happening there that is not residential. And I think this corner creates the beginning of that buffer that you're going to want to your residential neighborhoods. And like I said, if it was gonna, you know, if it was that full strip of land they were asking for, I would not approve it. I would not vote yes. But I think the corner up there by Melrose, in keeping with the uses on Melrose, I am very supportive of it.
Further discussion?
I'm still opposed to this change. I think it will have, I still think of the poor farm being too close. Now, for example, the bike library is organizing rides to different farms in town. So you can ride your bike and go to other farms, and the poor farm has been participating on that. And a lot of families go there and spend the day. And there are other nonprofit organizations doing family events that last all day. So I think it's too close to the poor farm. I'm also concerned about the uses, the list of uses that the city was showing. Some were not very family friendly. And I'm also concerned, like Susan said, that if it was the whole strip, she wouldn't approve. But I think approving this corner might give, you know, it might be a beginning for them to, for developers to keep asking for changes on the whole strip. So I'm very in favor of city growth, like, you know, but I think this is just not the right zoning to grow the city. And I am concerned, I know the city will grow whether we want it or not. And I worry about, if we don't put this here, where will it go? Because it will go somewhere, right? But I just think this thought in particular is not the right place for it.
And at this point, we're not voting on any specific proposal. We've got hearsay about what might happen there. But I think right now we're just voting on this particular thing, whether we're rezoning the land. And I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, we never really know what's going to end up somewhere when we rezone it. I mean, somebody brought that up, and just so you know, we have no control over that, and we never know. So we rezone land, not rezone for a particular use that's going to happen eventually in the future. So any further discussion?
Well, I appreciate that comment. I would agree. You know, I'm not making any decision based on the idea that Mid-American Energy may be the tenant here. I support this type of growth along IBW Road, whatever it might be. I know, you know, there's a couple references to some of the provisional uses there. I can pretty much tell you, and if something like an adult bookstore came before the what's the
Board of Adjustment.
Board of Adjustment, that's the word I'm looking for. I'm sure there would be a tremendous neighborhood input in that session, and I'm pretty sure it wouldn't get passed. But the rest of the uses, I think it's really important that this is not industrial, this is intensive commercial, and I think that needs to be restated again. I appreciate you pointing that out. I just, you know, you heard my comments. I'm in support of the rezoning.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, we had a motion by Science and a second by Craig. All those in favor of this application signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
So Padron is in the negative. So the application is approved 4-1. So we'll go on to item number 6, case number CPA 21-0001. This is a public hearing on an amendment to the comprehensive plan to change the South District plan to facilitate development that follows form-based principles. I presume this is you again, Kirk?
Correct.
This is, yeah, Kirk and Ann Russett, Neighborhood Development Services, she, her. This has been before you several times. We know you're quite familiar with this now. We do want to give you another background on the comprehensive plan amendment, a brief summary of what's in the staff report. As you're aware, we've been working with Opticos on this since 2019. Can you go to the next slide, Kirk? We've met with several stakeholders over the past 2 years to get input on the plan. Next slide, please. A few things I want to highlight. Since you saw this last, we have made some changes to the comprehensive plan. Some of these changes were also incorporated into the proposed zoning code. The vast majority of these changes were non-substantive changes. They were formatting issues, typos. There were also a few things that staff found that we wanted to clarify in the code, so we made those changes. One thing that we did change to the comprehensive plan future land use map was based on recent input from a landowner to the south of Weatherby Park. And I can go over that later in the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Kirk.
Thank you. As Ann stated, you said, or you've seen this before, it should look pretty familiar for CPA 21-0001. As far as the comprehensive plan amendment goes, it's really a couple changes to the context, the goals and objectives, some new land use descriptions and a new future land use map. And so that new future land use map is what's shown on the slide here. It's probably the most important part where it takes a form-based approach to land use and allocates uses as such. As far as context and background, there's some information about the form-based code process that's added, some information about history in terms of planning and history in terms of the area and development that's happened since the plan was initially adopted in 2015, as well as some generalizing language based on the proposed new future land use map. It also talks about form-based zoning and form-based codes and how those work, where instead of organizing zones by uses, you organize zones by what they look like and trying to tailor the character to the form of the area that you're looking at. So it is a difference and it clarifies how that would occur in the South District. As part of that, we also look at 3 new goals and objectives that add on to tying exactly what form-based zoning looks like in the South District and how those would support other goals that are also within the plan and broader goals of the city as well, including a diversity of housing types, including promoting walkability and use of alternative modes of transportation, and including new neighborhood commercial areas. So this is the current zoning map that is in the 2015 plan. Generally, it follows use-based standards that are more similar to our current zoning code. The first piece of the proposed future land use map is really making areas that are undeveloped, making them subject to form-based standards rather than our traditional use-based standards. So those are those areas in gray, primary south of the existing neighborhoods, but also a little bit south and west of Weatherby Park as well. And then it also includes a couple new land use maps. One which looks at future form-based land uses. This one is more detailed than the current land use map. It shows streets, which our land use maps generally don't. So you can see Sycamore goes down the middle, Sycamore is north-south down the middle. McAllister is sort of in the middle, east-west, and then you have South Gilbert Street to the west. I also wanted to point out what these areas look like. So in the past, I've talked about the T3 transect, which is suburban, and then the T4 transect, which is the urban transect. This is part of a spectrum of transects from T1 rural, the least intensive, to T6, which is the most intensive downtown uses. You think like the Jefferson Hotel is a good classic example of that. Since we're in the South District, we're only looking at those T3 suburban and T4 urban land uses. And the way that those have been organized in this future land use map is T3 of which there are two subclasses, T3 Neighborhood Edge, which is primarily along existing development. And then you have T3 Neighborhood General, which is sort of in the center of neighborhoods as well. And then when we're talking about the T4 urban districts, you're looking primarily along principal streets such as McAllister, along Sycamore in some parts, and then also along commercial nodes such as parks, such as single loaded streets, those sorts of areas. And so the three T4 zones are the T4 neighborhood small. So that includes mostly small apartment uses. You have the T4 neighborhood medium, which is when you start to get into more intensive uses up to 3.5 stories tall. Then the T4 Main Street is really only at the corner of Sycamore and McAllister, which would be the most intense use and would allow more commercial uses. There is also a thoroughfare map that's incorporated in this plan that talks about what these different streets should look like. So that includes specific streets for the primary streets that I've previously mentioned, and then most of the areas are shown as local streets in that sort of yellowish color. So the role of the commission tonight is to look at the proposed comprehensive plan amendment and see if it meets the following approval criteria at 14.8D 3D, which is that circumstances have changed and or additional information has come to light such that the proposed amendment is in the public interest. And 2, that the proposed amendment will be compatible with other policies or provisions of the comprehensive plan and any amendments thereto. So with regard to circumstances having changed, again, I'd like to start just with current circumstances briefly and what's happened since 2015 when the previous plan was adopted. So development has continued. You've seen residential subdivisions, Alexander Elementary was created, and McAllister Boulevard was completed up to Sycamore Street. That being said, about half of this study area is still undeveloped. And some is within city limits, some is outside of city limits, so it depends on where you're looking. But there are a variety of land uses, including agricultural, single and multifamily residential, and then also civic and public uses and plenty of open space down here. And development has generally coincided with that 2015 plan with the vision therein. As far as changes then, what we've seen since that plan was adopted was progress towards a plan objective to consider form-based codes to help ensure a true mix of housing at a compatible scale. So that was one of the objectives. And since that time, there's been a feasibility study in 2017, which looked at form-based zoning in the South District, and a discussion on a need to build that into the existing plan. And the future land use scenario that is currently in existence does not align with form-based standards. It aligns with those use-based standards, like I said. So it distinguishes between residential uses in a way that limits mixing of types. It has limited opportunities for neighborhood commercial. And so this progress constitutes a change in circumstances that makes the changes included the revised future land use map in the public interest. And then it also coincides with some other changes that have happened in city policy over time, mostly related to climate and equity. So with regards to climate, in 2018, Iowa City created its climate action or adopted its climate action and adaptation plan to reduce carbon emissions to a net zero by 2050. And generally conventional low density zoning creates higher greenhouse gas emissions because it makes it harder to travel by anything other than a car, which reinforces that auto-oriented pattern of development, traffic congestion, and higher parking minimums fit into that as well. So form-based planning helps this by creating compact neighborhoods that are more easily traversed by other modes of transportation. And with regards to equity, Resolution 2159, it was an effort or is part of the city's effort to promote equity within the city. And conventional zoning can indirectly support racial or class segregation. Some initial land use planning tools were used for that purpose explicitly until that was made illegal. And then sometimes it was used implicitly as well. In Iowa City, some of those, what we call exclusionary practices include single family only zones and large minimum lot sizes. And in Iowa City, around 81% of residential land is zoned for single family residential, and over half of that is low density. So form-based planning helps address that by trying to diversify housing choices and mitigate that barrier to affordable housing and the diversity of housing options that's possible with a form-based code. Then as far as other policies and provisions of the comprehensive plan, it has to be compatible with those. So the comprehensive plan, future land use map currently shows residential land uses anywhere from 2 to 8 dwelling units an acre with some 8 to 16 dwelling units an acre and some commercial uses. But really it's the goals that it's trying to tie into. So ensuring that there's a mix of housing types within each neighborhood, encouraging pedestrian oriented development, planning for commercial development and defined commercial nodes, supporting open space, protecting sensitive features, ensuring that parks are available, open spaces available to the public, et cetera. A lot of these are listed in the staff report, so I don't want to belabor the point. I've kind of abridged them in this version of the presentation. And then also the South District plan is important. So there's the existing future land use map, which I noted, corresponds more with use-based zoning classifications and form-based zoning classifications, which is somewhat against the text of the plan, which says to incorporate a true mix of housing at a compatible scale, including missing middle housing. And a lot of missing middle housing types, which are small multifamily units, usually from 3 to 6, but generally they're house scale in size. A lot of those aren't accommodated with the current zoning designations that are there. And so this amendment really refines categories to reflect that range of housing types that's desirable. And some other goals, including, again, protecting environmental sensitive features, small scale neighborhood commercial or mixed uses, making walkable neighborhoods, et cetera. And then those new objectives that I had mentioned that would get added in as part of this proposed amendment would further clarify how form-based codes help meet some of these criterias. And then again, there's a city council strategic plan, the climate action and adaptation plan, and the Black Lives Matter and systemic racism resolution that I previously mentioned that this also tries to follow. So again, this is that 2015 future land use map. You can see generally kind of that really light peachy color. That's most of the area. That's what's shown as 2 to 8 dwelling units per acre, that low density residential. So it still continues that trend of less of a mix of housing types. And you can see some denser uses along major residential streets, similar to new proposed zones. And then also you see a mixed use at Sycamore and McAllister. And again, I talked about this future land use map change. Then with the new one, it follows similar principles to the way that was developed again. The difference is that it adds in some additional commercial nodes. It adds in some additional density, a greater variety of housing types, but it generally aligns with the text of the code as well. And public comment, I did want to mention briefly as well. So from the Sandhill Estates HOA, you've seen all this in advance now. It talks about a lack of transition between the existing neighborhood along McAllister Court and new development. It requests a T3 land uses before they transition to T4 land uses, specifically at the corner of Gilbert and McAllister. Talks about impacts on education and access to emergency services and those sorts of concerns with infrastructure and public services. We also had comments and discussions with the South District Neighborhood Association's leadership group, and they noted that they would like to see more indoor recreational space. We also had conversations with Steve Gordon and Alita Feuerbach that requested to remove their property that's south of Lehman Avenue from the planning area. And then we have 3 additional specific comments that I'll let Ann take over because I realize I'm supposed to turn it over to her at public comment, but I've just.
These are comments that the commission is familiar with. A lot of these comments had echoed concerns from the Sandhill Estates HOA. Can you go to the next slide? And then there were several comments at the last public hearing on August 19th, which I'm sure the commission remembers. 13 members of the public testified. Many expressed concerns. Many of those concerns were related to the land use map, in particular lack of transitions with existing single family neighborhoods. Since the last meeting, we have received one new piece of public input related to the land use map. We also received an email from Southgate that supports the plan and the code. They feel like these efforts towards addressing issues of equity, inclusion, climate change, social interaction, et cetera, can be helped to be achieved through the plan and the code. Next slide, Kirk. This is the main change that I wanted to highlight to the commission, and it's circled here in red. We received a request from the landowner to change a portion of the future land use map from the pink that you see on the left to the lighter purple that you see on the right. The landowner provided engineered plans to staff showing the proposed street network, different housing types, and locations of wetlands. Staff is supportive of this change. It keeps the transition from existing single-family neighborhoods that is maintained. It allows some additional housing types closer to the park. Any development in this area will still need to be consistent with our sensitive areas ordinance. The plans that they've showed shows the wetland is actually smaller than it's currently shown on the future land use map. And lastly, based on our review of this change with the current rezoning criteria that we are proposing, staff determined that this change could have happened actually at the rezoning, but we felt it was more transparent to make the change now to the land use map. Next slide. That's all. That's all we have for the comprehensive plan amendment. Staff does recommend approval of the proposed amendment to the South District plan.
All right, thank you. Any questions for members of the commission for staff on case number CPA 210001?
Can you show on again the last change? It went from the pink to the light. Yeah, that one. So it used to be, I cannot read so far away, but it used to be T3.
It used to be T3 neighborhood edge. We're proposing it be changed to T3 neighborhood general. And that's the next land use category up. T3 neighborhood general allows a few different more housing types. There's more flexibility. There's still house scale buildings.
Okay.
Can you help me identify where this is located in the scheme of things?
Yes, Weatherby Park is just to the north. This is
Okay.
directly south of Weatherby Park.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Any other questions for staff or members of the commission? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Now is opportunity for members of the public to address the commission regarding this amendment to the comprehensive plan. And just a reminder, limit your comments to 5 minutes for the first go round, and then it's 2 minutes for the second go round.
I was gonna say, y'all could move up closer. If you
My name is Alex Heckman and I live at 843 McAllister Court. Good to see everybody again.
Howdy.
So I am the president of the Sand Hill Estates Homeowners Association. Appreciate the comments that were given last time, as well as that were noted as well. So I represent 126 homes that are in the neighborhood that are part of this proposed South District plan. So located north of McAllister Boulevard, running from McAllister Court east down Langenberg, including Keelboat Loop. And members of our neighborhood, as you saw last time, with the number that attended and care deeply about this issue. And just wanted to reiterate the 5 concerns as on behalf of them so that were brought to us and we compiled. So the first of which being a lack of transition to the existing neighborhood in the area immediately south of McAllister Court. That was noted earlier. So the reduction in required parking, the design sites being administratively changed following an approval, the impact on education, and the access to emergency services. And the Planning and Zoning Committee spoke to many of these concerns when we last met. However, our number one concern that was brought forward was the lack of transition to the existing neighborhood. And I don't feel was adequately addressed during that last meeting. So yeah, this is the section here. Thank you for pulling that up, Kirk. As far as the area that we're speaking to. So this area lacks an adequate housing transition between the existing neighborhood and the proposed zoning in the South District plan. And we ask the Planning and Zoning Committee to either amend the South District plan to include more of a T3 neighborhood edge and T3 neighborhood general zoning in this area. So we care deeply about our neighborhood and city, and respectfully request that you extend this transition T3 zone. And doing so will be consistent with the transition that will have been behind much of the other area that was proposed in the South District Plan. Again, we implore you to adjust the area, this particular area of the South District Plan to be consistent with the rest of the plan that was proposed. And appreciate you listening and considering this request.
Thank you, Alex. Leanne, I just have a quick question. I know I'm out of order here, but that triangle shape of land, several years ago, we considered a rezoning on that, and it seems to me that failed. Is that? Am I correct?
That's correct.
Correct. Okay. I just wanted people to know that rezoning is where the action is on this thing. So, okay. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jolia Shaw, and I am a part of the Board of Directors for the Sand Hill Estates Homeowners Association. So I'm kind of wearing two hats tonight. One being part of the Board of Directors for our Homeowners Association. The other hat I'm wearing tonight is an individual homeowner. This lot in particular that you see above here on the screen is directly behind where my home is. I've actually outlined where my lot is. My lot, the back of my property line is going to be the closest to the T4 development that's being proposed in that outlot right there. Just to reiterate, T3 neighborhood edge, which was afforded to most all of the existing development in the South District form-based plan, was offered this T3 edge to go all around those existing homes. The T3 edge includes large homes, duplex side-by-side, or cottage courts. What's being proposed 40 feet behind my property line is T4, which could be a small multiplex or a courtyard building, rows of townhomes. There's absolutely no transition from my single family home to this large development in this very, very small space. One of the things that I wanted to do today was to outline what this area really looks like. So if you flip back to the zoomed in area, that green space on the zoomed in area is a little deceiving because my lot from front to back is 137.65 feet. And that's from the Beacon Johnson County aerial views. When you look at my lot on that screen and compare it to the green space, which I've been told today is only 40 feet, it's very deceiving because that green space from top to bottom, from the back of my lot to the white space where that street is, does not portray as being 40 feet. It just simply doesn't. When you compare my entire lot is 137.5 feet long. So for us to say that you're putting that T4 development directly behind us and then presenting that purple map with that very large green space there, it just simply does not exist in the real realm of the situation. The other thing I would like to point out is something that I mentioned before, whereas this, not only is this street single family, but it's a very quiet cul-de-sac. Basically, nobody goes down that street unless they're lost or they know someone on that street that they're visiting. So to go to that quiet of a neighborhood, and then we have prairie in front of us, and then have that large development behind us, it just seems very extreme to go from that one single family home to that large development in that small of a space. The other thing is, where you notice where the green space is larger off to the right-hand side, there is kind of a there's a ditch there, and then there is the walking trail. And then the next little corner of that triangle is like an easement or a drainage. So there's nothing that's going to be developed there. That's where that road comes in, where the end of the median is on McAllister Boulevard. That's where the proposed road is to come on up behind us. So I guess the big thing is like I said, we're not asking for a big ask. I'm very encouraged by seeing that there is possibilities of change to this proposed plan, because Ann mentioned a change already tonight. So I'm hoping that you said that you're making these decisions on Iowa City as a whole, but we're the ones here.
5
our
minutes, so you
neighbors
wrap
here.
it up, please.
So I think I ask that you take that into account as well, our individual homeowners' interests as well.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Arch, and I am the Homeowners Association President for the Mankato Homeowners Association, which is at the end of Sycamore. We are technically not Iowa City. We are technically Johnson County. We're a little pocket right there of about 30 to 35 properties, depending on how you look at them. It represents about 80 people that live in that area. And so we are concerned with potential development on the Lehman and Soccer Park Roads area. I think we've already all heard enough arguments about environmental impact, animals and the like, but we live there and we see that sort of thing as well. And we would hate to see that disappear, to have a very small but highly dense strip of land developed within less than 100 feet from my house. We also have concerns that have been spoken by the Sandhills folks as well. In your master plan, you talk about the fact that you want more kind of middle housing, and that there doesn't appear to be much in that area yet. In our own HOA, that comprises about 40% of everybody that lives there. And if you look out my back door, you would look and see, I think it's 8 to 12 plexes that are there. So there's already a lot of higher density, or I guess I'm learning the terminology, middle housing, that is already in existence in that area. We're also concerned the DNR has already stated, due to the proximity of the water treatment plant, that this is an area where there should not be, or there should at least be, extreme caution used in any further development of property in that area. Finally, in the past, we personally, our neighborhood association has been negatively affected on 3 different occasions by things that have been done by the city. The wetlands, when they were first kind of regraded about 14, 15 years ago, resulted in a lot of water collection in the backyards of our people. Nobody from the city ever came out to try to deal with that for us. When Alexander Elementary School was put in right across the street from us, it took about 30 to 40 acres out of corn production. We have our own sewer system. We have our own lift station. We have our own lagoon. We have our own water system. And when that was being built, no one took into account what that might do to us. It flooded our lagoon system. We had to pay thousands of dollars to be able to deal with that. I said lagoon system is actually the lift station that was negatively affected by that. And then with it also, the sidewalks around there were regraded, which we like. We enjoy them every single day, but no one ever looked into the fact that that redirected a lot of water flow so that several of our backyards, if you have any type of rain at all, floods out. My shed gets full of water after about every rain. I've called the city before to ask them to deal with that, to talk to them about that. No one has ever responded. Also, and a concern that people in my neighborhood have asked me to bring is that when Alexander Elementary was built, prior to that, we had no crime of anything of any significance in our association. And within the first year of of the school being built, we had 80, did you hear me? 80 break-ins of cars and homes in our neighborhood. And so we would like you to really consider what type of designation. I guess I've learned the language. I think we would also be very supportive of a T3 designation for anything going on in the future with this area. And closing, you've all served a long evening tonight, and you're right, you do have a thankless job. So I just want to thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Can you tell me the name of the neighborhood association?
Makeda Homeowners Association.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Cool.
We are off of Sycamore.
Well, I know exactly where you're at. I live up the street, but yeah, I didn't know it had a name.
We've got a name. Thanks.
Anybody for a second go around for 2 minutes?
Jolia Shaw, 785 McCollister Court, again on that rectangular outline there. One other thing, as an individual homeowner, and I know that a couple of the commissioners have mentioned that they live in the South District, and I know Kirk lives within our HOA as well. I also ask you that do live in the South District, is your home afforded the courtesy of a neighborhood edge with this plan? Mine is not. Another thing I kind of wanted to reiterate, something that I discussed at the last meeting, was the density of this proposed plan. Again, we're talking about 900 acres, and based on the figures that we received from Ann and Kirk, it could be anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 dwellings, which Iowa City has a 2.5 person per dwelling average. So we're looking at anywhere from 10,000 on the low end to 20,000 people added to the population of Iowa City in this small 900 acre area. To give you an idea, again, North Liberty's current population is 20,000. If you take Tiffin, Solon, Lone Tree, and University Heights combined, it's about 10,000. So we're looking at adding that many people in that small of an area. So I guess that's my HOA hat. Again, my individual homeowner hat. I just strongly beg you to reconsider that triangle of land to a T3 edge. Give us the same courtesy of that transition from our single family homes to these new developments, just like all the other existing ones have.
Okay, seeing no more speakers, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. I have a motion on CPA 21-0001.
I move.
Motion by Patron
Second.
and second by Craig. Okay, again, this is our second look at a comprehensive plan amendment tonight. It's to be the same criteria that we used to evaluate the previous one for the standards we use. I've been heavily involved, well, not heavily, I've been involved as a member of planning and zoning on this whole form-based code for the South District since, I think you said that started in 2017, maybe I don't know when
2017, the feasibility report was
That's when it was.
finished.
That's
Yeah.
when it seems like. So I was interviewed by Opticos at that time. I've never wavered in my belief that this is what's best for this area of town. I am a 100% supporter of affordable housing and increasing the housing options and increasing density is the only way to increase volume, to reduce prices. So frankly, this is the first opportunity we've had for people who have say they advocate for affordable housing to place a vote to show whether that's a true advocacy or just words. I truly advocate for affordable housing. I think this has to be done. I understand change is scary, but I believe this is best. I live here. This applies to me. I have undeveloped land behind me. This will apply to me just like everybody else. I'm actually enthusiastic about it. And I think people over the next decades will find how helpful this is. And we're going to end up, if this comes to fruition, this South District is really going to be a cool place where people want to live. And so I just support this enthusiastically.
Yeah, I also support the plan, the way the city staff presented it. I think affordable housing right now is one of my main concerns for the city. And I was reading on the news the other day that there are towns in Colorado where it's a town in the mountains, and the houses prices has gone up so high that now nobody there can afford to live. So then the coffee shops and all the restaurants cannot hire people because those low-paying jobs the people cannot live there. So it's a real concern. So I do think we need affordable housing.
Further discussion?
I'd like to ask the staff about the triangle, which seems to be of concern to the McAllister folks, which I absolutely see. But the way I see it is, I would guess that the thought process is the T4 belongs there along Gilbert Street. And is that what your thought process was when you said this is T4, not T3?
Yeah, that was part of it. It's also very similar to the current future land use map, which allows multifamily in this area. We did think it was important to provide a transition though, and that's why we're showing that strip of open space. And so because of McAllister and Gilbert and it being the corner of two arterials, we feel that the T4 makes sense there. But we also feel that there needs to be that transition with the open space. I do want to note that even though it's T4, we're still talking about house scale buildings. Some of these buildings are going to have more units, but they're still going to be house scale.
I think it's interesting that in some of these lengthy, difficult conversations we've had in the last couple of months, this whole visual up and down in Hickory Hill Park, it was all about they were going to look up the hill and what were they going to see. And in this instance, I think from the geography, you're going to be looking down the hill and what will you see? And, and in the Sloth Hour Road, I think it was up the hill too, right? It's just, it's
across the field.
It's hard to, when you have fallen in love with the view of something, it's difficult when something comes and fills it up.
Is there anything so we talk about the green space strip there, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's highly over exaggerated from reality of what's there now. Is the city staff, have a commitment to, making sure that what comes along in that area is going to have that additional green space? How do we assure that that happens?
It needs to be assured at the rezoning stage when we change the zoning map.
And so what could we do to assure that there was a decent sized buffer if we chose it, felt like that was needed?
It could be a condition of the rezoning. That land is a trail now too. So I mean, the city is going to want that maintained.
Mhm.
So it would just happen through our normal rezoning and subdivision process.
Because in this item, we're not approving a future land use map or
Correct.
or
Right.
doing a rezoning. So,
Yeah.
Scales, everything's not exactly to scale. So.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We were at home the other night, we were watching some videos on Japanese neighborhoods and they're all missing middle. There's like 57 zones in Tokyo and they're all centered. They all start at a train station and radiate out from there with what I would say we would consider neighborhood commercial and then mixed use. We're then on to a mix of mixed use and single family homes. And the entire city is built up with that. And some of the natural amenities are there and they talk about that. And it was just cool to go, okay, this is what this is all about. And that's one of the densest cities in the world. But it's still, because of this idea of mixing these uses, it really ended up being kind of cool, I thought. And I had another thing, and it just slipped out of my mind.
You'll remember tonight
it'll-
about 2:00.
It'll come back, yeah. It's, I live on the south, I live in the South District, right up the street. I have been involved in this process since about 2017. I went to the very first, public sessions and have tried to go to everyone after that. And I have been excited, like you, I've been excited about seeing where this goes and seeing what it does. And I think that, it's always scary and it's always different when you live in a place and you buy a place and you see one thing and it turns out to be another. And I've always said, unless you own the property, you don't control the property. And that's an unfortunate reality of the way it works. The other thing I wanted to point out to the commission is that my point was proven just a little bit ago, when all the people who didn't care about this rezoning, comprehensive plan change, form-based code change left. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, is that, and bless your hearts for sticking around as long as you did, but it only matters if it's your neighborhood. It only matters if it's your neighborhood. We were talking about the exact same changes here. And all those people went home because they don't care about their neighborhood. I just wanted to point that out. It's becoming more and more disturbing to me as we look at how do we plan for the city's growth.
But that's human nature. And
Sure it is.
Our job is to sort of be sympathetic, which I totally am, to all these people. And at the same time, look at the public good. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's
hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, this is our town and we want to see it develop the way it should be.
Yeah.
And we all know that there is very little affordable housing in Iowa City and surrounding areas. So anytime I can see anything looking halfway affordable, and it still won't be affordable, I'm glad to see it come in.
It's a scale of affordability. Yeah.
Further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of amending the comprehensive plan to change the South District plan signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, the motion is approved 5-0. Next item up is case number REZ 21-0005. This is consideration of a zoning code amendment to adopt form-based standards for new development as identified in the South District Plan.
Thank you, Chair. At your August 19th meeting, staff gave a very comprehensive presentation on this item, on the text amendment. We're not going to repeat that tonight. I wanted to highlight a couple of changes that we made since the last time. The vast majority of these changes were non-substantive typos, formatting issues. A couple clarification items that I wanted to note include there is a building type diversity requirement per block in the code, and we clarified that requirement that it only applies to primary buildings, not accessory buildings. So a carriage house, for example, would not meet the diversity requirement. You have to have a single family home and a duplex, for example. The other change that we made is that there's a requirement for the minimum number of units per building in the code. And we clarified that that only applies to residential uses because some of those building types could house commercial uses, and the minimum unit count does not apply to commercial, but it would apply to residential. So those are a couple of changes I wanted to highlight. Staff is recommending approval of REZ 21-0005, which is the text amendment related to form-based standards.
Any member of the commission have questions to staff regarding this item?
And did you want to talk about the public comment at all, or that's all pretty much reflected in the last meeting as well?
The only additional comment that we received was the letter from Southgate, and that was referenced in the comprehensive plan item. In general, the letter shows support for the amendment.
Hearing no discussion, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this. You guys have the floor if you want to say anything. All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Sines, second. Townsend? Discussion? Any discussion?
I'm very sympathetic to your cause. I also, the comment was made, this is on the other side of this, that block of land is South Gilbert Street.
Right.
And the corner of Gilbert and McCollister, which is obviously a major intersection. And so that's why I struggle with limiting that too much.
And just the thing clarified that there was a rezoning for that particular area of land that failed.
Yes.
For
yes.
much denser than what this is planned for in this comprehensive plan
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
And just in all honesty, I supported that. I think I was the only one to support it because I believe diligently, I really believe in affordable housing, and I really believe you got to increase volume to give people, there's just, supply and demand. It's that simple. No, nothing simple about affordable housing, but it is part of the equation.
And one thing I appreciate about this whole concept is it increases the density, but it also offers lots of public area. Not just the existing parks, but the walkways and the courtyards. And when people share, when there's not large or many private backyards with room for swing sets and jungle gyms and trampolines, then the public space becomes so important in those areas. And I think that this plan has done a good job of, well, we're going to go out and, kick the ball over here or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. It just as just to give you a little bit of solace, these proposed zoning for that triangle area of land is way less dense than what was discussed in that rezoning. And it still will be house scale as opposed to that. We were talking about bigger buildings.
We're talking about large apartment buildings, and that's why I'm comfortable with this. I don't think we're not going to see that.
Yeah.
They can't be large scale apartment buildings. So I'm comfortable.
So I just wanted you to know the history a little bit on that. So any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approval of this zoning code amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, it is approved 5-0. Item number 8, case number CPA 21-0003. This is a request to set a public hearing for October 7, 2021 on a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan on an update to the fringe area policy agreement between Johnson County and the city of Iowa City. Is there any presentation on this?
No presentation.
No. So could I have a, I love you guys. Is there a motion for approval setting the date of the public hearing for October
Move
7th?
approval.
So we have a motion by Craig. We have a second by
I second.
Padron. Do we have a location for the public hearing? We should specify that.
It will be in this room.
So it'll be in this room. Discussion? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, this motion is approved 5-0. So this public hearing is set for October 7th, 2021 in this room. So number 9 is consideration of meeting minutes from August 19th, 2021. Are there any major additions or corrections to the minutes that any commission member would like to note?
They did a miraculous job.
I am consistently impressed.
Of capturing it all.
Oh, we got a motion for approval by Townsend. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Craig. Discussion? Hearing no discussion, those are in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, the motion is approved 5-0. Number 10, consideration of meeting minutes of September 2, 2021. Any significant corrections or additions? Noting none, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Motion by Science, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Craig, discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, the motion is approved 5-0. Number 11, planning and zoning information.
Just one update, the city.
Wake up.
Wake up. My bedtime alert went off 5 minutes ago. The city council approved the vacation along South Gilbert Street for the Gilbane project, if you remember that from a few months ago.
All right. Anything else?
I
No,
have,
that's
I
it.
I have one thing. I was successful in downloading and saving the document. And here's the key. This was the key. It had to go through all 500 and some pages before that little thing popped up at the top saying the pop-up blocker block. I had never waited for that long. I just happened to get sidetracked on something else and all of a sudden it popped up. So just keep that in mind if anyone has an issue with that. It doesn't show up.
I'm so happy to know you're not a Luddite.
What? No.
How were the links, Mark? Did the links work well?
No, it didn't on mine, but that may be my reader.
You mean the bookmarks?
Yeah,
Yeah, it didn't on mine, no.
okay.
But
No, it didn't on mine either. On my
Really?
iPad. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't know why. It might be just my iPad.
Except 500 pages is a ream of paper.
Okay, any other discussion on planning and zoning information? All right, item 12, adjournment. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
We got a motion by Townsend. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Padron. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, the motion's approved and we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.